Hey guys, tonight we are stepping into a world of silk wallpaper, silver breakfast trays, enormous country houses, and women who appeared to spend their lives reclining gracefully beside windows while someone else quietly polished the furniture. It is the world of the rich Victorian wife. The real one, not the version in which she wanders through a rose garden for 6 hours wearing a perfectly fitted gown and thinking wistfully about a naval officer. Because beneath the lace, the calling cards, and the highly decorative cushions was a daily life governed by rules so complicated that drinking tea could become a test of character. A wealthy Victorian wife might have servants to light her fires, carry her bathwater, dress her hair, clean her rooms, raise her children, prepare her meals, answer her door, drive her carriage, and remove a dead pigeon from the conservatory without troubling her about it. Yet somehow, despite employing a small private government, she was still expected to supervise everything, remain beautiful, produce respectable children, manage her husband without appearing to manage him, and maintain the calm expression of a woman who had never once considered pushing anyone down the main staircase. But first, a huge, genuine thank you to the viewer who suggested tonight's topic. You know who you are, and you have chosen an excellent corner of history in which everyone looks comfortable and almost nobody is. Suggestions like yours genuinely help shape the channel, and I appreciate them more than you might think. If you enjoy these long, quiet journeys into the stranger parts of the past, please consider liking the video and subscribing, but only if you actually want to. No pressure. You already have enough people in your life asking whether you have remembered to do something. Drop a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. Somewhere in the world it is always 2 a.m, and someone is listening to a detailed explanation of Victorian household linen instead of sleeping. The channel is also on Spotify, so you can find the link in the description if you prefer listening there. Now, dim the lights. Put a fan on if you have one. Pull the blanket up and find the cool side of the pillow while it is still available. Let your shoulders drop. There is nothing you need to organise. No servants waiting outside your bedroom door, and no housekeeper carrying a notebook toward you with news about the coal cellar. Before we begin, let us sit with a few questions. What did a rich Victorian wife actually do when other people performed nearly every physical task in the house? How long did it take to get dressed when your clothing had more structural engineering than a railway bridge? Did you raise your own children, or did you receive them after lunch like small visiting diplomats? Could you spend your own money? Could you leave your husband? What happened if the cook resigned on the morning of a dinner party? How many people could you offend by returning the wrong calling card? And how did you fill an entire day when respectable society had decided that employment was beneath you, boredom was unattractive, and sitting alone with your thoughts was probably medically dangerous? Congratulations! You have just woken up in a wealthy British household sometime in the 1870s. Queen Victoria is on the throne. The empire is expanding. The Industrial Revolution is covering the cities in smoke. And 6 people have already been awake for 3 hours preparing for the moment you open your eyes. You are rich, married, beautifully housed, and legally complicated. Good morning. Try not to dismiss the cook. Let us begin with waking up. Although in your house the morning began several hours ago, long before you opened your eyes, a housemaid crept into the room carrying coal, brushes, cloths, and the quiet resentment of someone who had been awake since 5. She cleared the ashes, laid the fire, drew the curtains, emptied the basin, and attempted to perform all of this without making a sound. You now wake beneath heavy curtains in a bedroom warmed just enough to prevent the water in the pitcher from developing an opinion. A bell pull hangs beside the bed. One small tug summons another human being. You have not yet moved your feet, and already the domestic machinery is waiting for instructions. The room itself is grand by ordinary standards, although comfort remains surprisingly conditional. The bed is tall, the mattress thick, and the sheets made from good linen, but the air beyond the blanket still has the sharp, damp chill of an English morning. Central heating has not yet arrived to rescue the wealthy from their own architecture. Your house contains carved staircases, painted ceilings, marble fireplaces, and corridors where the temperature could preserve meat. The fire helps, but it does not perform miracles. Heat gathers close to the grate while the corners of the bedroom remain loyal to winter. If you extend 1 foot beyond the covers, the room immediately reminds you that industrial progress has priorities, and apparently warm toes are not yet among them. On the hearth, fresh coal begins to crackle. Smoke rises through the chimney, assuming the flue is drawing properly and has not decided to fill the room instead. Coal is everywhere in Victorian Britain. It heats homes, powers factories, drives locomotives, and coats cities in a dark film that settles on windowsills, curtains, skin, lungs, and anything else foolish enough to remain outdoors. Even in a wealthy house, soot has ambitions. The housemaid who prepared your fire belongs to the lowest ranks of the indoor servants. She may be young, perhaps 14 or 15, though some begin even earlier. Her workday started before dawn and will continue until long after you have gone to bed. She lights fires, carries water, empties slops, sweeps rooms, beats rugs, cleans grates, and moves through the house while trying to remain unseen. In a well-run household, servants are meant to create the impression that work happens naturally. Fires light themselves, mud disappears from boots, water arrives hot, ashes vanish. Breakfast materializes behind silver covers. The fewer signs you see of the labour, the more efficiently the house is considered to be managed. This creates a strange domestic theatre. You are surrounded by people whose success depends on your forgetting that they are people. You lie still for another moment and listen. Somewhere below, a door closes softly, a scuttle scrapes against stone. Pipes knock faintly inside the walls, if the house is modern enough to possess them. From the stable yard comes the muffled movement of horses being fed and groomed. In the kitchen, pans are already striking ranges, knives are working across wooden boards, and the cook is directing breakfast with the concentrated authority of a field marshal who has been handed several eggs. You could rise without ringing, of course. Nothing physically prevents it, but this would confuse the system. Your maid is waiting to help you dress. The breakfast room is being prepared according to your usual hour. Letters have been placed on a tray. Curtains elsewhere in the house are being opened in sequence. The entire morning has been built around the assumption that you will behave approximately as you did yesterday. Routine is one of the great luxuries of wealth. You do not need to decide how the fire will be lit or where the hot water will come from. You merely decide when to summon it. So you reach toward the bell pull. Somewhere beyond the wall, a wire moves through a series of passages and rings a small bell on a labelled board in the servants' hall. Your room has announced itself. A maid looks up. Someone wipes her hands. Footsteps begin climbing the stairs. You have now been awake for perhaps 3 minutes. Management has commenced. It is time to get out of bed, which is not an activity you undertake privately. Your lady's maid enters with tea, letters, and a clear understanding of what your body is expected to look like by lunchtime. She knows which gown has been brushed, which gloves have been cleaned, which bonnet has been reshaped, and which social engagements you have forgotten despite agreeing to them personally. She may know more about your schedule than you do, and considerably more about your marriage than anyone would find comfortable. A good lady's maid is skilled, discreet, observant, and nearly impossible to replace. You therefore speak kindly to her, partly from decency and partly because she controls your hair. She places the tea beside the bed and begins the morning report. The weather is damp. Your blue walking dress is ready. The hem of the grey silk has been repaired. Lady Pembroke has moved her call to Thursday. Your husband has already gone downstairs and has left behind the particular silence that suggests he is annoyed about something but would prefer you to discover what it is through careful investigation. Your maid delivers this information without expression. Discretion is one of her most valuable professional skills. She sees letters before they are hidden, stains before they are explained, and moods before they are arranged into polite conversation. She knows when you have slept badly, when you have cried, and when the necklace given to you by your husband has remained untouched in its case for 3 months. She does not comment. Commenting would be dangerous. A lady's maid occupies an unusual position in the household. She is a servant, certainly, but she works closer to you than almost anyone else. She handles your clothes, hair, jewellery, private correspondence, medicines, and occasionally your secrets. She travels with you, sleeps near your rooms, and may accompany you during visits lasting weeks or months. Unlike the housemaids who sweep, scrub, and carry coal, she is considered an upper servant, ranked alongside the valet and beneath the housekeeper in the elaborate domestic hierarchy. Even below stairs, Victorian society has found room for class divisions. Your maid may supervise younger servants who help care for your clothes. She repairs lace, removes stains, airs gowns, cleans gloves, packs trunks, and negotiates with dressmakers who insist that a sleeve was designed correctly despite clear evidence to the contrary. She keeps track of ribbons, feathers, shawls, fans, boots, parasols, and enough small personal objects to stock a modest shop. When you travel, she packs everything into fitted trunks. When you arrive, she unpacks it. If a gown is crushed, a button missing, or a bottle leaks across your best gloves, the failure belongs to her, even if the railway has spent 4 hours treating the luggage as agricultural equipment. Her influence over your appearance gives her quiet power. She knows which colours improve your complexion and which make you resemble a decorative illness. She knows whether a particular bodice still fastens comfortably and whether admitting this aloud would be unwise. She can suggest that a hat is no longer fashionable without using the word unfashionable, which requires diplomatic skill of a very high order. You sit up and take the tea. It is hot, sweet, and strong enough to persuade you that consciousness may be worthwhile. While you drink, she opens the curtains wider and begins laying out the morning clothes in careful order. There is a system to everything. Stockings first, then linen, then corset, then petticoats, supports, bodice, skirt, collar, cuffs, jewellery, and whatever additional framework fashion has decided your body requires today. You ask whether the green dress might be better. Your maid pauses. The pause is respectful, brief, and devastating. The blue would be more suitable, ma'am. This means the green dress is wrong for the weather, the engagement, your complexion, the current fashion, and possibly civilization itself. You accept the blue. The negotiation is complete. Let us talk about washing, because wealth has improved the experience without making it simple. In an older house, a portable bath may be carried into your dressing room and filled with hot water brought upstairs by servants in heavy cans. In a newer and grander home later in the century, you may possess a proper bathroom with piped water, an innovation spoken of with the excitement normally reserved for political reform. Either way, warmth requires coal, water, labour, and advance notice. You do not simply turn a handle and stand beneath an endless hot shower while reconsidering your life. Several people have coordinated so that you may sit briefly in a copper or porcelain tub before the water begins cooling. Luxury has arrived, but it is out of breath. Your maid tests the water with one hand while another servant carries away an empty can. The bath has been positioned close to the fire, partly for comfort and partly because the rest of the room remains cold enough to make undressing feel like an act of personal courage. A folding screen has been placed around the tub, creating privacy from people who have already carried the bath through the house and now know exactly how much water you require. In a wealthy household, bathing might happen regularly, although not always daily and not necessarily in the way you would understand it. A full immersion bath is only one part of personal cleanliness. On other mornings, you may wash at a basin using warm water, soap, cloths, and careful attention to the face, neck, hands. In other areas, polite Victorian writing often approaches like a nervous visitor nearing an unfamiliar dog. Soap is widely available by this period, though its quality varies. Your household can afford finely scented toilet soap, perhaps perfumed with rose, lavender, almond, or violet. It produces a pleasant lather and does not resemble the harsher blocks used for laundry and heavy cleaning. Even so, the bathwater soon carries a faint mixture of soap, coal smoke, perfume, and the unavoidable atmosphere of a house heated by fires. You lower yourself into the tub. It is warm but not extravagantly deep. Water is expensive in labour even when the water itself costs little. Every additional inch has been pumped, carried, heated, lifted, and poured by someone whose arms are now receiving a detailed education in your comfort. By the later Victorian period, the newest urban houses may be connected to municipal water supplies, while large country houses sometimes develop their own systems of tanks, pumps, boilers, and pipes. Bathrooms become increasingly fashionable among the wealthy, fitted with elaborate tubs, washstands, and eventually showers that resemble complicated brass machinery designed by someone who distrusted simplicity. Yet plumbing remains unpredictable. Hot water may depend on a kitchen boiler or range. Pipes can freeze, tanks can run low, drains can smell. Early water closets may be installed with great pride and then produce consequences that make the old chamber pot appear emotionally stable. The Victorians are enthusiastic adopters of technology, especially when it comes with polished fittings, decorative tiles, and the possibility of mentioning it to guests. A modern bathroom signals wealth, progress, and an encouraging willingness to place large amounts of water directly above expensive ceilings. You wash your arms and shoulders while your maid prepares towels near the fire. Hair washing is a separate undertaking and is not casually added to the morning. Your hair is long, thick, and arranged daily into complex styles. Washing it means drying it thoroughly, which can take hours and may involve towels, brushing, heat, patience, and a general suspension of other plans. Today the hair remains dry. Civilization will continue. The water begins cooling almost immediately. The fire cannot quite keep pace, and the metal sides of the tub seem determined to conduct every available degree of warmth into the surrounding air. You finish before comfort turns into endurance. Your maid holds open a warm towel. You rise carefully, step onto a mat, and are wrapped before the cold can make a formal introduction. The bathwater now has to be removed in exactly the same manner it arrived. Bucket by bucket, carried back through the corridor and down the stairs by servants who must avoid spilling it onto carpets chosen by people who never carry bathwater. You feel clean, refreshed, and pleasantly warm. 3 other people require a brief rest. Now the clothing starts, and the first thing to understand is that a Victorian gown is not put on so much as assembled around you. A chemise goes nearest the skin, followed by drawers, stockings, perhaps a corset cover, and enough linen to give the laundry staff a permanent professional purpose. These layers absorb perspiration and protect the expensive outer garments, which are difficult to clean and far too valuable to encounter the human body directly. Every ribbon is tied, every stocking secured, and every fold adjusted by hands that have done this hundreds of times. You are not yet visibly dressed, but you are already wearing more fabric than a modern household keeps in an airing cupboard. The chemise is loose, soft, and usually made from linen or cotton. It sits directly against your skin, protecting you from the corset that will soon arrive with its usual message about posture and personal freedom. It is plain compared with the gowns displayed upstairs, but the quality still matters. Fine linen feels smoother, washes better, and tells the laundress that this household possesses both standards and money. Next come the drawers. Earlier in the century, women's drawers were not always worn universally, but by the middle and later Victorian period, they had become a normal part of respectable dress. They are generally loose, knee-length, and divided through the centre for practical reasons that polite fashion manuals prefer to leave unexplored. Clothing must accommodate the realities of using a chamber pot while wearing several layers and a structure around your waist. Victorian engineering is at its most honest when dignity has temporarily left the room. Your stockings are drawn up over the legs. They may be cotton, wool, or silk, depending on the season, occasion, and depth of your husband's confidence in the household accounts. They rise above the knee and are held in place with garters. Elastic exists, but not yet in the dependable modern form you would trust during a brisk walk. Garters must be secure without being painfully tight, because a stocking slipping during a formal call would create a private emergency beneath an otherwise calm expression. Your maid smooths each one carefully. She checks for ladders, stains, and worn heels. Nothing escapes her. A tiny hole in the toe may be invisible to the world, but the domestic system regards it as a moral warning. Over these layers may come a corset cover, a thin garment worn above the corset to soften its lines and protect the bodice from rubbing against the stays beneath. It also prevents the outlines of metal fastenings and boning from announcing themselves through the fabric of your dress. Victorian modesty is deeply concerned with concealment, including the concealment of the devices creating the shape everyone is expected to admire. Then come the petticoats. There may be more than one. A plain under petticoat provides warmth and coverage. Additional petticoats add volume, protect the dress, and help the skirt fall correctly over whatever structural support fashion requires. Some are heavily starched. Others are trimmed with lace, embroidery, or decorative tucks that may never be seen by anyone except your maid, your laundress, and perhaps your doctor during a crisis. This unseen decoration matters because respectability extends beneath the visible surface. A wealthy woman's underclothing is expected to be clean, well-made, and properly maintained even when nobody sees it. The idea is not merely comfort, it is order. Every hidden ribbon confirms that chaos has not yet entered the household. Of course, all of this linen must eventually be washed. Laundry is one of the heaviest and most exhausting operations in a large Victorian home. Washing day requires hauling water, boiling linens, rubbing stains, using soap or washing soda, rinsing, wringing, drying, starching, ironing, folding and repairing. A rich household may employ dedicated laundry maids or send finer items to specialists, but the work remains immense. White fabric is beautiful partly because someone else has spent an entire day persuading it to become white again. You rarely witness this process directly. The linen disappears into the lower regions of the house and returns folded, pressed, and faintly scented. It seems almost magical, provided you do not go downstairs and discover the steam, heat, red hands, aching backs and language being used near the copper boiler. Your maid ties the last fastening and steps back. You glance at yourself in the mirror. The visible gown has not yet appeared, but the outline of the day is already taking shape. Your body has been wrapped, softened, covered, and prepared to support several more layers without complaint. You are now dressed enough to become uncomfortable. Fashion has barely started. It is time for the corset. Despite the more sensational stories, not every Victorian woman was tightened to the dimensions of a decorative candlestick, and extreme tight lacing was criticised even in the period. But a corset was still the ordinary foundation of respectable dress, shaping the torso, supporting the bust, and producing the fashionable silhouette of whichever decade currently controlled your ribs. Your maid draws the laces firmly, checking the fit while you stand with practiced patience. The pressure is familiar rather than dramatic. You can breathe, although your lungs now understand that enthusiasm is unnecessary. The object is not merely to make you smaller, it is to make you correct, which is a far more exhausting ambition. The corset fastens at the front with a metal busk and is adjusted at the back through a ladder of laces. It is made from layers of strong fabric, reinforced with steel or whalebone, which is not actually bone but baleen taken from the mouths of whales. Victorian fashion has reached into the ocean and returned with structural support. Your maid works from the middle of the lacing, tightening upward and downward, so the pressure is distributed evenly. She does not simply seize both cords and pull, as though starting a lawnmower. A properly fitted corset is shaped for your body and intended to provide support rather than immediate medical drama. If it pinches sharply, rubs the skin, or prevents ordinary movement, something has gone wrong. This does not mean it feels like leisure wear. You become aware of your posture at once. Your shoulders settle back, your torso is held upright. Slouching is no longer forbidden exactly, but the garment has made it administratively difficult. Every movement must now pass through a quiet internal committee before being approved. The fashionable shape changes as the century moves forward. Earlier Victorian corsets help support the long pointed bodices and wide skirts of the 1840s and 1850s. Later examples lengthen over the hips and shape the torso for the bustles and narrower skirts of subsequent decades. By the 1880s, the ideal figure emphasises a full bust, a small waist, and pronounced hips, a silhouette that looks natural only if nature has been given extensive instructions. Some women do practice tight lacing, gradually reducing the waist through sustained compression. Fashion magazines discuss remarkably small measurements, and satirical prints show women being pulled into corsets by servants using the strength normally associated with dock work. Doctors warn about displaced organs, fainting, digestive difficulty, damaged ribs, and the general risks of treating the abdomen as unwanted luggage. The extent of the damage remains debated, partly because Victorian medical writing is often shaped by moral panic as much as evidence. Corsets become convenient objects on which to blame weakness, vanity, infertility, hysteria, indigestion, poor circulation, and almost any other problem affecting a woman. A physician who cannot explain a symptom may look at the corset and feel that the investigation has concluded successfully. Still, excessive restriction can plainly cause harm. You know this without requiring a medical journal. If you cannot eat comfortably, bend easily, or draw a deep breath, the garment is not supporting you. It is winning. Most women wear corsets because clothes are cut to require them. Without one, your bodice will not sit correctly, the waistline will wrinkle, and the entire outer structure will lose the form expected by respectable society. Choosing not to wear a corset is therefore not like declining an accessory. It is more like arriving at dinner without the agreed shape of a human body. Class also matters. A wealthy woman owns several corsets suited to different activities. A lighter model may be worn in the morning, a more elegant one beneath evening dress, and a sturdier version for riding. Each can be professionally fitted, altered, cleaned, and replaced when it loses shape. Working women often wear corsets too, but theirs must allow bending, lifting, scrubbing, carrying, and standing for long hours. Support can be useful during physical labour. The notion that every Victorian woman spends the day fainting onto a chaise longue is largely the invention of people who have not considered how difficult it would be to operate a laundry while unconscious. Your maid finishes the lacing and ties the cords securely. She runs her hands over the sides, ensuring the pressure is even and no linen has folded beneath the edge. A crease trapped there now could become a small but committed source of misery by noon. You turn toward the mirror. Your waist is defined. Your back is straight. Your body now possesses the smooth, controlled outline on which the rest of the clothing can be built. You look elegant, disciplined, and entirely prepared for breakfast. You also feel very strongly that breakfast should not be too large. The corset is only the foundation. Depending on the year, your shape may require petticoats, crinolines, pads, steel hoops, or a bustle projecting behind you with the confidence of a small piece of furniture. Fashion changes quickly across the Victorian period. The wide skirts of the 1850s give way to fullness at the back, then narrower forms, then increasingly elaborate bustles that make sitting down a technical problem requiring judgment and clear communication. Your gown is designed around these structures, and your movement must adapt to them. Doorways become calculations. Chairs become negotiations. Stairs become a test of whether dignity and gravity can reach a temporary agreement. If you have awakened in the middle decades of the century, your maid may begin with several petticoats. These provide warmth, modesty, and volume, though enough of them together become heavy, hot, and determined to wrap themselves around your legs whenever you walk. Before the steel cage crinoline becomes widely fashionable, women build the desired width using layers of starched cloth, horsehair fabric, and padded underskirts. The result is effective, but it gives your lower body the weight and thermal properties of a small upholstered room. The cage crinoline changes everything. Introduced in the 1850s, it consists of flexible steel hoops suspended from fabric tapes, creating an open framework beneath the skirt. It is lighter than the mountain of petticoats it replaces, and allows air to circulate around the legs, which is welcome until a cold wind enters from below and reminds you that ventilation is not always friendly. Your maid fastens the structure around your waist. It drops into shape with a faint metallic movement, expanding until you occupy considerably more floor space than you did a moment ago. You now have a personal boundary several feet wide. Nobody can stand too close unless the hoops bend, which they will, but not always in the direction anyone expects. Crinolines are practical in some ways and hazardous in others. They can catch on furniture, brush against candles, and lift unexpectedly in strong wind. Fire is the greatest danger. Open flames fill Victorian homes, from fireplaces and gas lamps to candles and kitchen ranges, and wide skirts can ignite before the wearer fully understands what has happened. Newspapers report terrible accidents involving women whose dresses catch fire and burn with alarming speed. Fire guards are recommended. Caution is advised. Fashion continues. As the century moves on, the shape changes. The enormous circular skirts begin flattening at the front, while fullness gathers behind. The crinolette appears, followed by bustles formed from steel frames, padded cushions, stiffened fabric, or combinations of all three. You are no longer carrying a bell around your legs. You are carrying a shelf behind you. The bustle supports layers of drapery, pleats, bows, fringes, and carefully arranged folds. From the front, your figure may appear narrow and controlled. From the side, it suggests that your dress has remembered an appointment several seconds after the rest of you. Sitting requires practice. You do not simply lower yourself directly into a chair and hope. You turn, judge the distance, guide the skirt, allow the bustle to shift, and descend carefully so the framework settles rather than collapses. Some bustles are designed to fold or spring upward when you sit. Others resist with the moral certainty of a church committee. Sofas are easier, provided nobody has placed a decorative table behind you. Carriage seats are more complicated. Theatre chairs are an insult. A narrow doorway requires you to angle the skirt or compress the hoops with one hand. Passing another fashionably dressed woman in a corridor becomes a quiet encounter between two architectural plans. Your maid adds the final petticoat over the structure, smoothing it carefully so the steel or padding does not show through the gown. The outer skirt will fall across it in controlled folds, concealing the engineering beneath. That concealment is important. Everyone knows the structure exists, but good dress requires it to appear as though your body is naturally developed according to the current fashion plate. At last, the skirt is lowered over your head or fastened around your waist. Fabric settles around the frame. Your silhouette expands behind you with expensive confidence. You are now ready to cross the room. The room may need to make adjustments. Next comes the hair. You do not wash it every morning, because drying a great mass of long hair in a cold house would consume half the day, and possibly your remaining will to live. Instead, it is brushed, arranged, pinned, waved, braided, rolled, and supplemented where necessary with false pieces saved from your own combings or purchased from a hair dealer. Fashionable styles shift throughout the century, but they nearly always require time, skill, and a quantity of pins that could defend a minor fortress. Your maid works behind you while you read a letter or stare at yourself in the mirror. By the end, your hair looks naturally elegant in the specific way that takes 40 minutes and another woman's complete attention. You sit before the dressing table while your maid removes the loose braid or night arrangement that kept your hair from attempting independence while you slept. It falls down your back in a heavy curtain. For a wealthy Victorian woman, long hair is expected. Cutting it short may be practical during illness or childhood, but fashionable adult hair is generally grown, maintained, and hidden inside elaborate arrangements that make its true length difficult to guess. Your maid begins brushing from the ends, working upward to avoid pulling. The brush may have a polished wooden, ivory, or silver-backed handle, with firm, natural bristles that distribute oil through the hair and remove dust gathered from coal smoke, carriage journeys, upholstered rooms, and a city atmosphere that treats every hairstyle as available storage. Brushing is not merely cosmetic. In the absence of frequent washing, it performs much of the daily cleaning. Dust and loose hair collect in the brush. Your scalp is massaged. Natural oils move down the strands. A little scented hair oil or pomade may be applied to smooth flyaways and add shine, although too much leaves you looking as though you have recently been introduced to butter. The loose strands removed by the brush are not necessarily discarded. Your maid may place them in a small covered dish called a hair receiver, where they accumulate until there is enough to use as padding inside a hairstyle. Nothing is wasted. Even your shed hair is expected to contribute to the household. If nature has not provided sufficient volume, false hair can be added. Hair dealers sell switches, braids, curls, and pads made from human hair. The best pieces are carefully matched to your colour and blended so neatly that no one should detect them. Everyone understands that fashionable styles require assistance. The deception is acceptable as long as it succeeds. The arrangement depends on the decade. Earlier Victorian styles may divide the hair smoothly at the centre, drawing it over the ears into loops or braids gathered at the back. Later fashions add rolls, curls, nets, and greater height. When bustles grow behind the body, the hair often rises and expands as though attempting to maintain architectural balance. Your maid may use pads known as rats to support the shape. These can be made from purchased material or from your own saved hair. Braids are wrapped around them, curls pinned above them, and every visible join concealed. A fine net may hold the arrangement in place. Decorative combs, ribbons, flowers, feathers, or jewellery are added according to the occasion and the hour. For evening, the style may become more elaborate. For morning, it should appear simpler, although Victorian simplicity remains a demanding condition involving careful symmetry and 15 concealed pins. Heat may also be required. Curling irons or crimping tools are warmed near the fire and tested before being applied. The temperature must be hot enough to shape the hair, but not so hot that it produces smoke, a smell, and an immediate change of plans. Your maid has learned the correct heat through experience, observation, and perhaps one unfortunate incident involving a previous employer's fringe. You remain as still as possible while pins slide into place. One catches against the scalp, another is removed and repositioned. A curl refuses to agree with the others and must be persuaded through moisture, heat, and personal criticism. Meanwhile, you read the morning letter in your hand. Your sister reports that her youngest child has measles. An aunt wishes to visit for 3 weeks. A neighbour has invited you to luncheon on Friday and has spelled your husband's name incorrectly, which may be accidental but will require analysis. Behind you, your maid continues building. At last, she places the final pin and holds up a second mirror so you can inspect the back. The arrangement is smooth, balanced, and carefully suited to your face. No padding shows. No false hair can be detected. Nothing suggests the combings, steel pins, hot iron, purchased braid, or 40 minutes of concentrated labour supporting the effect. You turn your head cautiously. The hair remains in place. It looks effortless. Everyone involved knows better. Now we come to your complexion. Victorian ideals praise pale skin, bright eyes, soft lips, and the appearance of moral purity, which means you must look beautiful without appearing to have attempted beauty. Obvious paint is associated, especially earlier in the century, with actresses, courtesans, and women who have made peace with being discussed after dinner. Respectable cosmetics, therefore, operate quietly. Rice powder, cold cream, tinted lip salves, violet preparations, and delicate rouges may appear on the dressing table under names that suggest medicine rather than vanity. You are not applying makeup. You are improving your health in a suspiciously flattering shade of pink. Your maid begins with cold cream, smoothing a small amount across your face and wiping it away with a soft cloth. Preparations made from oils, waxes, rosewater, and scented ingredients help remove dust and soften skin exposed to coal smoke, dry rooms, and the general Victorian commitment to placing an open fire in every available space. The cream feels cool against your cheeks. It smells faintly of roses and almonds. On the dressing table, cut glass bottles catch the morning light, each one promising freshness, youth, purity, or some other quality that society expects you to maintain indefinitely without admitting that maintenance is involved. Pale skin remains fashionable because it signals that you do not work outdoors. A tanned face suggests fields, markets, gardens, or other places where useful activity occurs. Your complexion should instead imply that you have spent your life indoors receiving letters and experiencing manageable emotions. If you venture outside, you carry a parasol, you wear a bonnet, you may use veils, gloves, and long sleeves to keep sunlight from touching anything. Society has decided should remain delicately untouched. Freckles are treated as personal betrayals. Advertisements offer washes, creams, and lotions to remove them, often using ingredients that range from ineffective to actively hostile. Rice powder or finely prepared face powder may be brushed lightly over your skin. It reduces shine and creates the smooth, pale finish admired in portraits. Some powders are harmless enough. Others contain lead, bismuth, mercury compounds, or ingredients whose long-term relationship with the human body is less supportive than the advertisement suggests. The Victorians are aware that certain cosmetics can be dangerous. Medical writers issue warnings, newspapers report poisonings, and respectable manuals advise women to avoid suspicious paints. Manufacturers respond by placing words such as natural, botanical, pure, and hygienic on the label, a strategy that has continued into the modern age with excellent stamina. Rouge must be applied cautiously. Too much colour looks artificial. Too little leaves you resembling the lace collar beneath your chin. Your maid taps a restrained amount onto your cheeks, blending it until the result appears to have arisen naturally from good health, fresh air, and a conscience free from troubling thoughts. In reality, fresh air in London contains smoke, horse traffic, and enough soot to alter the colour of a handkerchief before luncheon. Your lips receive a little salve, perhaps tinted with carmine or another colouring ingredient. The effect should be soft rather than dramatic. Nothing must suggest that you have looked into a mirror and deliberately improved what you saw. Respectability requires the result, while maintaining a firm objection to the process. The eyes present their own temptation. Bright, shining eyes are considered beautiful, and preparations containing belladonna are sometimes used to widen the pupils. Belladonna is poisonous, but it has the advantage of producing the desired expression while also causing blurred vision, sensitivity to light, and occasional difficulty focusing on the person admiring you. Beauty has always been willing to make practical compromises. Later in the century, arsenic complexion wafers and solutions are marketed with claims that they can clear blemishes and create pale, smooth skin. Some women take them. Arsenic can indeed alter the complexion, though the accompanying nausea, nerve damage, and possibility of death make the improvement difficult to recommend with enthusiasm. You avoid the arsenic this morning. The day already contains enough administration. Your maid brushes a trace of powder along your forehead and steps back. She studies the result with professional concentration, then removes almost everything visible with a clean puff. This final softening is essential. The face must not look painted. It must look as though you naturally wake with an even complexion after sleeping beside a coal fire beneath several pounds of hair. You lean toward the mirror. Your cheeks are gently coloured, your lips are soft, your skin appears smooth and pale. Nothing looks excessive. Nothing looks deliberate. You appear fresh, healthy, and completely untouched by effort. The effort has taken 20 minutes and several chemical industries. At last, breakfast. Depending on the household, you may eat downstairs with your husband, take a tray privately, or appear late enough that he has already vanished into politics, business, sport, or the reassuring male mystery known as important affairs. The meal is generous: eggs, fish, cold meats, rolls, toast, preserves, tea, coffee, perhaps kidneys for anyone who feels the morning has not begun aggressively enough. Beside the silver service lies the post. Invitations, bills, appeals, family letters, announcements, and requests for patronage wait beneath the butter dish. You have been awake for less than 2 hours, and society has already found your address. The breakfast room is smaller than the formal dining room and considerably more relaxed, which in a wealthy Victorian house means you may sit down without 12 guests watching how you handle a spoon. The curtains are open, a coal fire burns in the grate, morning light falls across polished furniture, framed landscapes, and a sideboard carrying enough food to suggest that the family expects reinforcements. Breakfast is often served in the English style, with dishes arranged on the sideboard rather than handed around course by course. A footman may serve you, or your husband may help himself before returning to the newspaper. The eggs sit beneath a silver cover. The bacon remains warm through a combination of heated dishes and domestic optimism. A kedgeree of rice, smoked fish and egg may appear, its origins shaped by British encounters with India and transformed into something suitable for people who prefer empire before 9. You begin with tea. The tea service belongs to your side of the table because pouring tea is a respectable domestic ritual and one of the few forms of visible labour that can be performed while wearing jewellery. You measure the strength, add milk or sugar according to preference, and remember who takes what. A skilled hostess can manage 6 cups, 3 conversations, and 1 developing family disagreement without allowing the teapot to pause. Your husband lowers his newspaper long enough to remark that the government is making a complete mess of something. The precise issue may involve Ireland, taxation, electoral reform, foreign policy, or a railway company in which he has invested unwisely. You listen, offer a calm response, and resist pointing out that he has placed marmalade on his cuff. He then notices the letters. The post arrives several times a day in major towns, and correspondence moves with impressive speed. Before telephones become common, the postal service allows families and friends to exchange notes quickly enough that arranging dinner can require the same number of messages as a minor diplomatic crisis. Your letters are placed on a tray, sorted by hand and appearance. Thick cream paper with an elegant seal may contain an invitation. A plain envelope could hold a bill. Black edging signals mourning. An unfamiliar hand may belong to someone requesting money, employment, influence, or all 3. You open a note from a neighbour first. She asks whether you will attend her musical evening on Wednesday. The invitation appears simple, but accepting it may interfere with another engagement. Refusing requires an excuse. The excuse must be convincing without suggesting that her musical evening is exactly what you suspect it will be. Another letter announces an engagement between 2 young people whose attachment everyone has been discussing for months while pretending not to notice. You express delight. Your husband asks who they are. You explain. He remembers neither of them but agrees that it is excellent news. Then comes the household bill. Your eyes move down the figures for wine, groceries and repairs. The amount charged for candles seems unusually ambitious. You make a small note to speak with the housekeeper, who will speak with the supplier, who will explain that prices have risen, quality has improved, or the previous figure was entered incorrectly by a clerk who has now conveniently left the business. A final envelope contains an appeal from a charitable institution seeking a subscription. The language is respectful, urgent, and designed to make refusal feel like a private moral collapse. Your name may appear on a printed list of donors if you contribute enough. Victorian charity understands both compassion and marketing. Meanwhile, breakfast continues cooling. You take a piece of toast and discover that the toast rack has performed its usual function of preserving shape while removing heat. The butter is firm, the coffee is strong. The kidneys remain available and faintly confrontational. Your husband folds his newspaper, announces that he must leave, and departs toward the significant affairs of the day. The door closes behind him. You remain at the table with half a cup of tea, 6 unanswered letters, a questionable candle bill, an engagement to acknowledge, and a musical evening to avoid without causing offence. Breakfast is over. The correspondence has only just begun. Let us talk about correspondence, because a wealthy Victorian wife writes constantly. You answer invitations, send condolences, acknowledge gifts, arrange visits, thank hostesses, consult relatives, advise daughters, question tradesmen, and maintain relationships with people you have not seen in years, but must never be allowed to think you have forgotten them. Letters are social infrastructure. A delayed reply can suggest carelessness. An overly warm reply can suggest intimacy. A brief reply can suggest insult. You choose paper, ink, phrasing, and timing, with the caution of someone disarming a very polite explosive device. The envelope is sealed. The footman takes it away. By tomorrow, 3 people may have misunderstood it. You move from the breakfast table to a writing desk placed near the window. The desk is fitted with drawers for paper, envelopes, sealing wax, stamps, spare nibs, and letters you intend to answer shortly, a category capable of surviving for several months. A blotter rests beneath your hands. Beside it stands an inkwell, attractive enough to disguise the fact that ink behaves like a small domestic predator. It stains fingers, cuffs, carpets, and reputations if applied to the wrong sentence. You choose a steel pen nib and dip it carefully. Fountain pens exist later in the century, but many are still unreliable enough to make a simple note feel like negotiations with plumbing. A dip pen gives you control, provided you remember to replenish the ink before the sentence fades into a thin grey surrender. The first reply is easy. You thank your cousin for sending a basket of pears. The pears arrived bruised, and 2 were already developing independent ecosystems, but none of that belongs in the letter. You describe them as delicious, thoughtful, and much enjoyed by the household. The household has not seen them. The cook looked into the basket, made a private decision, and removed it. Next comes a dinner invitation. You would like to attend, but the date clashes with a visit from your husband's aunt, who possesses both a substantial income and a memory specifically designed to preserve grievances. You cannot simply write that you are busy. The refusal must sound regretful enough to honour the hostess without sounding so regretful that she assumes you dislike the aunt. You write that a prior family engagement makes attendance impossible and that you are deeply disappointed. You are not deeply disappointed. The hostess serves dinner very late, and her eldest son explains railway finance to anyone who becomes trapped beside him. But good manners are built from feelings edited into more useful forms. Letters to close female relatives may be warmer and more revealing. You describe the children's health, the difficulty with the new housemaid, your husband's mood, the state of the garden, and the possibility that your daughter has become attached to a young man whose income appears mostly theoretical. Even here you remain cautious. Letters can be lost, opened, passed around, or preserved long after everyone involved has died. A private sentence may eventually become a family document read aloud by descendants who have misunderstood the entire situation but are enjoying themselves enormously. You therefore use implication. You do not write that your husband has behaved selfishly. You write that he has been very much occupied with his own concerns. You do not write that your sister-in-law is unbearable. You write that she remains entirely herself. Victorian correspondence has perfected the art of causing injury through accuracy. Your maid or secretary may help with routine notes, but personal letters require your own hand. Handwriting carries character. A firm, elegant script suggests education and composure. Crossed-out words suggest agitation. Blots suggest haste. Writing that slopes wildly across the page suggests either emotional distress or a train journey. Postage has become more affordable and standardized since the introduction of the penny post in 1840. Adhesive stamps allow letters to travel cheaply across the country, and regular collections make correspondence remarkably quick. In London, several deliveries may occur in a single day. A question sent in the morning can receive an answer before dinner, allowing social anxiety to operate with unprecedented efficiency. You finish a note of condolence last. This requires particular care. The paper may have a black border. Your language must be sincere but restrained, offering sympathy without forcing the bereaved person to comfort you for being so affected by their tragedy. You sand or blot the final page, fold it neatly, and place it inside its envelope. Depending on the household and period, you may seal it with wax, use an envelope prepared with gum, or simply leave the practical details to a servant. The letters form a small stack on the desk. Invitations have been accepted, affection maintained, offence avoided, charity acknowledged, and a basket of rotten pears successfully transformed into a gesture of family devotion. You ring the bell. The footman collects the post and carries it away. Your words leave the house looking calm and orderly. They are about to begin several entirely new problems. The door opens, and the housekeeper arrives carrying keys, account books, and news from below stairs. This is the administrative centre of your morning. She reports on linen, candles, preserves, coal, breakages, staff illnesses, deliveries, and the deeply unsettling fact that the second kitchen maid has given notice. You may not scrub the floors or polish the silver yourself, but the household is considered your domain, and failures within it travel upward until they reach you. A rich Victorian home is a complicated institution containing perhaps 10, 20, or even more servants, depending on the family's wealth. You are not doing the labour. You are chairing the meeting. The housekeeper sits only after being invited. At her waist hangs a ring of keys large enough to suggest that somewhere in the house a medieval prisoner is being kept. Each key opens something important. Linen cupboards, storerooms, china cabinets, preserve closets, tea chests, and supplies of soap, candles, sugar, and other goods that servants are apparently expected to steal the instant no respectable woman is looking. Tea and sugar remain under especially careful supervision. They are expensive, portable, and easily converted into small private comforts. The housekeeper measures them out and records what has been used. In a household built on abundance, extraordinary attention is paid to preventing someone below stairs from enjoying an unauthorized spoonful. She opens the account book. The first matter is linen. 3 tablecloths have been sent to the laundry. 2 sheets require repair. 6 napkins have developed stains whose origins are not discussed, although last night's gravy is a leading suspect. The laundry maid says the newest soap is harsh. The supplier says it is improved. Somewhere between these 2 statements, the household linen is slowly being destroyed. You make a note. Next comes coal. More has been used than expected because the weather has turned cold. This seems reasonable until you remember that the house contains 20 fireplaces and that each room is heated by burning money in a grate. Coal dust enters with every scuttle, settles on carpets, and appears mysteriously on the hands of people who have touched nothing. The housekeeper continues. One of the footmen has broken a decanter. He claims the glass was already cracked. The butler claims the footman was careless. The footman is not present to explain why a previously cracked decanter waited until he touched it to collapse. Then there is the second kitchen maid. She is given notice because the cook shouted at her. The cook says she did not shout. She merely spoke clearly from the other side of the kitchen while holding a carving knife. The kitchen maid has accepted a position in another house where the wages are slightly higher, and the cook is rumoured to throw only wooden spoons. Losing a servant creates more than inconvenience. It creates work for everyone who remains. The scullery maid may be moved upward temporarily. The first kitchen maid will absorb extra duties. The cook will complain that dinner cannot possibly be produced under these conditions, then produce it anyway while ensuring that the entire household understands the scale of her sacrifice. You ask whether the girl can be persuaded to stay. The housekeeper gives you a look suggesting that persuasion would require either money or the removal of the cook, and that the roast beef expected this evening has already chosen a side. The cook is far more difficult to replace. The kitchen maid will go. Servant turnover is a constant feature of a large household. Young women leave to marry, seek higher wages, escape difficult employers, or move to houses where the bedrooms are not located directly beneath the roof. Footmen pursue positions offering better uniforms or more impressive families, Valets and ladies' maids may leave after personal disagreements so intimate that neither party can explain them publicly. References matter. A servant without a good character from a former employer may struggle to find another respectable position. This gives you considerable power over the departing kitchen maid's future. You could mention her temper, her carelessness, or her inability to endure being addressed with cutlery. Instead, you agree to provide a fair reference. The housekeeper nods. Nothing emotional is said, which is how Victorian households often express approval. She turns to the preserves. 12 jars of plum jam remain. 4 jars of peaches have spoiled. 1 jar is missing. This produces a silence. The missing jar could have been served, misplaced, broken, or eaten below stairs. The amount involved is trivial. The principle naturally is enormous. You ask the housekeeper to make discreet inquiries. This means everyone in the servants' hall will know about the missing peaches by lunchtime. The meeting concludes with candles, carpet repairs, a blocked drain, and the need to order more lamp oil. You approve several purchases, delay 2 others, and agree that the west bedroom curtains can survive another season if nobody looks at them in strong daylight. The housekeeper closes her book and gathers her keys. She leaves to carry your decisions downstairs, where they will be interpreted, adjusted, complained about, and eventually transformed into clean rooms, hot meals, repaired linen, and a replacement kitchen maid. You have spent 20 minutes managing the household. The household will spend the rest of the day recovering from the meeting. Now the account books appear. Meat, flour, wine, coal, soap, lamp oil, repairs, wages, carriage maintenance, dressmakers, school fees, and charitable subscriptions all require money, which has the unpleasant habit of leaving even the grandest house when invited. Some husbands take close control of expenditure. Others hand household allowances to their wives and then express surprise when feeding 30 people costs more than feeding one man at his club. You examine figures with the housekeeper or steward, question an unusually large butcher's bill, and wonder whether the household has eaten an entire cow since Monday. The answer may be yes. Respectability has a considerable appetite. The household ledger lies open before you, its ruled pages filled with neat columns of figures. In theory, these numbers represent an orderly domestic system. In practice, they record hundreds of small emergencies wearing the respectable disguise of arithmetic. The butcher has supplied beef, mutton, veal, poultry, sausages, kidneys, bones for stock, and enough bacon to defend the breakfast room against a prolonged siege. Large Victorian households consume astonishing quantities of food because they are not feeding only the family. Servants must eat as well, although their meals are simpler and served below stairs. Guests arrive without warning, children develop appetites. Leftovers are reused, servants' meals absorb what remains, and anything still standing by the third day may be placed inside a pie and given a fresh sense of purpose. You run one finger down the butcher's total. The figure remains offensive. The housekeeper explains that there were 12 guests at dinner on Thursday. Your husband invited 2 gentlemen to stay without mentioning it, and the cook rejected one joint because she considered it unsuitable. You ask what was wrong with it. The housekeeper says the cook did not like the look of it. This is not evidence in any legal sense, but the cook controls dinner, and therefore her instincts carry the weight of constitutional law. Next comes the wine merchant. Claret, sherry, port, champagne, and brandy have been delivered to the cellar. Some bottles are intended for guests, some are used in cooking. Some disappear during evenings when your husband entertains friends and later describes the gathering as very quiet. The butler keeps the cellar book, recording what comes in and what goes out. A trustworthy butler is expected to guard the wine with the seriousness of a military quartermaster. He carries the cellar keys and knows precisely how many bottles remain, although he may choose not to notice that your husband has requested the same bottle twice. Then there is coal. Coal heats the bedrooms, drawing rooms, dining rooms, nurseries, schoolrooms, kitchen ranges, servants' halls, and water boilers. Every fire must be laid, lit, fed, cleaned, and laid again. During cold weather, a grand house consumes fuel with magnificent indifference. You may own paintings, silver, land, and furniture inherited from people whose portraits judge you from the walls, but without coal, everyone will be sitting beneath those portraits wearing coats. Soap appears in several categories: fine soap for the family, stronger soap for laundry, household soap for floors, pots, and anything the servants believe can survive vigorous contact with it. Lamp oil and candles add another layer of expense, although gas lighting may now illuminate parts of the house if the pipes have been installed, and everyone has agreed not to think too much about leaks. Repairs form a separate kingdom of financial despair. A roof tile has slipped, a chimney requires attention, the stable door no longer closes properly. The drawing room bell pull rings in the wrong part of the servants' quarters, which has resulted in the pantry answering requests intended for the footmen and everyone becoming quietly furious. The steward or housekeeper explains each cost. You approve some, question others, and postpone the rest until postponement becomes more expensive than repair, which is the traditional life cycle of household maintenance. Your personal bills arrive with their own delicate tension. The dressmaker has charged for silk, lace, alterations, embroidery, and several urgent adjustments caused by fashion changing its mind. A wealthy woman may receive a fixed allowance for clothing and personal expenses, but the amount depends entirely on the marriage settlement and her husband's generosity. Before the Married Women's Property Acts gradually expand married women's legal control over earnings and property, much of what belongs to a wife becomes her husband's under the law of coverture. Even in a rich household, you may live surrounded by valuable objects while possessing limited independent authority over the money required to purchase a ribbon. Your husband may glance at the dressmaker's bill and ask whether another gown was truly necessary. You could ask whether another horse was truly necessary. You do not, because the morning is progressing well. Instead, you explain that the gown was required for the season and that the older one could not be altered again without becoming an argument made from fabric. The accounts are totaled. The butcher remains expensive. The coal remains essential. The roof still leaks. The family continues looking prosperous. You close the ledger. The house has survived another month. Financially, it would prefer not to discuss the experience. It is time to discuss dinner, even though breakfast has barely settled. If guests are expected, the menu must be considered with the cook or housekeeper. Courses need balance, seasonality, visual effect, and enough excess to reassure everyone that the family finances remain healthy. Soup, fish, entrees, roasts, vegetables, sweets, savouries, fruit, wine and cheese may all appear in succession. Dietary restrictions are simple because almost nobody admits to having any. Your principal concern is whether the salmon will arrive fresh, whether the aspic will hold, and whether Lady Beatrice is still offended by the soufflé served during her last visit. She is. Lady Beatrice maintains grievances with admirable nutritional consistency. The cook does not normally come upstairs unless the matter is serious. Communication passes through the housekeeper, partly because hierarchy must be preserved, and partly because the cook is currently standing in a hot kitchen surrounded by knives and sees little benefit in discussing decorative fish arrangements with you directly. The proposed menu has been written in a careful hand. Potage à la reine, turbot with lobster sauce, cutlets, roast saddle of mutton, game, vegetables, charlotte russe, jellies, savouries, dessert. French names appear throughout because wealthy Victorian dining considers food more sophisticated when everyone must briefly wonder what it is. A potato may be perfectly respectable, but give it a French title and place parsley around it, and it begins expecting an introduction. You study the list. There must be no obvious repetition. 2 cream sauces in succession suggest carelessness. Fish followed by another delicate dish may make the dinner feel weak. Too many rich courses risk exhausting the guests before dessert, though Victorian hosts routinely respond to this danger by adding cheese. Season matters. Asparagus in spring demonstrates good judgment. Strawberries arriving early demonstrate money. Pineapples remain impressive, especially if grown in your own heated glasshouse, where several gardeners have devoted months of labour and extraordinary quantities of coal to producing one fruit that will be admired for 10 minutes. The fish presents a greater concern. Without refrigeration, freshness depends on speed, weather, ice, and the honesty of the supplier. Fish may travel by railway from the coast, packed in ice and delivered astonishingly quickly by the standards of the century. This is one of the triumphs of industrial transport. It also means that dinner now depends upon a timetable, several porters, and no mechanical failure between the sea and your kitchen. If the salmon arrives late, the cook must improvise. Cooks dislike improvising when 12 guests have been promised salmon. The aspic is another source of anxiety. Savoury jellies are fashionable, elaborate, and visually impressive. Meat, fish, eggs, or vegetables may be suspended inside clear gelatine and turned out onto a platter in a shining architectural form. The effect resembles a meal preserved during a very elegant natural disaster. Producing a clear aspic requires skill. Stock must be prepared, clarified, strained, flavoured, cooled, layered, and encouraged to set. In warm weather, it may refuse. The cook can place it in an ice chest, if the household has one, but ice is expensive, and the kitchen is hot enough to make confidence melt at the edges. You ask whether the jelly will hold. The housekeeper replies that the cook believes it will. This is not the same as saying it will. Dinner service itself is changing during the Victorian period. Earlier in the century, service à la française places many dishes on the table together. Later, service à la russe becomes increasingly fashionable, bringing courses one after another while servants present and serve them individually. This keeps food warmer and gives the meal a more orderly progression. It also requires more servants, more timing, and a butler capable of coordinating a moving procession of hot dishes without allowing anything to collide in the doorway. The seating plan influences the menu as well. Elderly guests may prefer familiar food. Younger guests may enjoy novelty. A gentleman known for gout should probably avoid several dishes, though he will almost certainly eat them and discuss his physician's incompetence afterward. Lady Beatrice presents a different problem. At the previous dinner, the soufflé collapsed before reaching the table. The cook blamed the footman for opening a door. The footman blamed the kitchen passage. Lady Beatrice looked at the dish, then at you, with the calm expression of a woman filing the incident for future use. You suggest avoiding soufflé. The housekeeper agrees immediately, which tells you the household has no desire to relive the inquiry. The final menu is approved. The salmon will be ordered, the aspic will be attempted, the mutton will be roasted. A moulded cream will replace the soufflé, reducing the evening's exposure to structural failure. You hand the menu back. The decision travels downstairs, where fires will be lit, stock skimmed, pastry rolled, poultry dressed, vegetables trimmed, silver polished, and several servants quietly blamed for things that have not yet happened. Dinner is still 10 hours away. It is already causing trouble. Let us go below stairs without physically going below stairs, because your information arrives through reports. The footman has been seen speaking too warmly to the parlour maid. The new housemaid is careless with china. The cook refuses to share her range with anyone she considers emotionally unstable, which includes most of the kitchen. Servants form friendships, arguments, romances, alliances, and quiet systems of resistance within the household. You control their employment and provide the character references that may determine their futures. They, in return, know when you quarrel with your husband, how much wine he drinks, which bills remain unpaid, and exactly how long you cried after receiving yesterday's letter. Authority is a comforting arrangement until you notice how many witnesses it employs. Below stairs, your house becomes a different country. The rooms are plainer, the ceilings lower, and the furniture selected for endurance rather than admiration. Bells ring from labelled boards. Boots wait to be cleaned. Trays pass through narrow corridors. Somewhere, a maid is eating breakfast while standing, because the morning has declined to provide her with a chair. The servants' hall has its own hierarchy, nearly as elaborate as the one upstairs. The butler and housekeeper stand at the top of domestic society. Beneath them are the valet, lady's maid, cook, footman, nurses, governesses, housemaids, kitchen maids, scullery maids, and whichever unfortunate child has most recently been employed to clean knives. Rank determines duties, wages, bedrooms, clothing, and where everyone sits at meals. An upper servant may be addressed by surname and enjoy a private room. A young maid may sleep in a shared attic bedroom reached by a staircase apparently designed to discourage rest. Your family expects servants to be loyal, discreet, sober, clean, punctual, obedient, and nearly invisible. Servants expect wages, food, lodging, time off, and employers who do not behave like escaped asylum administrators. Neither side states these expectations quite so directly. The footman and parlour maid present a familiar difficulty. Romance between servants is not unusual because they work long hours in close proximity and have limited opportunities to meet anyone else. Employers still regard it with concern. Courtship can distract from work. Marriage may cause a female servant to leave her position. A pregnancy outside marriage creates scandal and almost certainly dismissal, usually for the woman rather than the man, because Victorian morality is remarkably efficient at identifying the person with the least power. You ask whether their conversation was truly improper. The housekeeper replies that they were laughing. This is not evidence of misconduct, but it is dangerously close to happiness during working hours. You suggest that they be watched rather than dismissed. Losing an experienced footman over a conversation would inconvenience dinner, and moral principles are often softened by staffing requirements. The new housemaid is another matter. She has chipped a saucer from a breakfast service ordered 20 years ago and no longer manufactured. The damage is tiny. The household response is not. China represents money, taste, continuity, and the confidence that every cup will survive longer than the people drinking from it. A servant who breaks one piece threatens the entire arrangement. She may be charged for the damage, reprimanded, or dismissed if the carelessness continues. Yet you know that housemaids carry trays through dim corridors, polish rooms crowded with fragile objects, and work from before dawn until late evening. Eventually, gravity becomes involved. You tell the housekeeper to caution her. This mercy will be noted below stairs, so would cruelty. Servants discuss employers constantly, although never where employers are meant to hear. Your temper, generosity, habits, marriage, wardrobe, and visitors are all known in detail. A household that appears silent is merely speaking somewhere else. Small acts of resistance occur. A disliked gown may take longer to repair. A bell may be answered slowly. Food may be served less generously to a guest who has insulted the maid carrying it. Nobody declares rebellion. The roast simply arrives with slightly more gristle than diplomacy requires. Servants also protect you. They conceal mistakes, intercept unwelcome callers, soften gossip, and recognize trouble before it reaches the drawing room. A loyal maid can preserve a reputation. A resentful one can provide society with enough material to survive an entire season. This is why good management matters. Fair wages, reasonable food, proper rest, and respectful treatment do not abolish the hierarchy, but they make the household function with less bitterness. Some wealthy mistresses understand this. Others believe servants should be grateful merely to exist beneath a respectable roof. Those households change staff frequently and remain mysteriously surprised. The housekeeper closes her report. The footman will be watched. The maid will be warned. The cook will retain exclusive emotional jurisdiction over her range. Below stairs, work resumes. So does the conversation about you. Your husband enters, perhaps carrying a newspaper, and the expression of a man who believes the house runs naturally. Depending on the marriage, you may be affectionate partners, courteous allies, exhausted parents, strategic collaborators, or two people sharing an address and a particularly determined set of curtains. Victorian ideals speak warmly of companionate marriage, domestic harmony, and the wife as the moral centre of the home. The law and custom still grant the husband immense authority, particularly earlier in the period. Your influence is therefore often indirect. You suggest rather than command, guide rather than confront, and allow certain ideas to return to you several days later wearing his name. He sits beside the fire and opens the newspaper as though this is the first quiet moment anyone in the house has experienced. You have already discussed dinner, reviewed the accounts, approved repairs, settled a dispute involving peaches, and prevented a kitchen maid from being professionally destroyed by a carving knife. He has answered 2 letters and formed an opinion about Russia. You ask whether he slept well. He says reasonably well, then begins describing a meeting at his club. The subject involves railways, investments, and a gentleman named Fortescue, who has behaved very badly over shares. You listen with appropriate interest while attempting to remember whether Fortescue is the one with the whiskers or the one whose wife refuses to sit beside Lady Beatrice. Your husband's public world is meant to be larger than yours. He may enter business, parliament, the army, law, local government, or the management of family estates. He attends clubs where women are not admitted, discusses politics over dinner, and conducts financial arrangements whose consequences may eventually arrive at your breakfast table in a sealed envelope. Your world is described as domestic, but this does not make it small. It means that its complexity is hidden inside the house. Victorian culture celebrates the idea of separate spheres. The husband belongs to the competitive public world. The wife belongs to the peaceful private one, where she creates a haven from commerce, politics, and ambition. This is a comforting theory, especially for the person who leaves the haven each morning without organising it. You are expected to soften his burdens, improve his morals, soothe his temper, and ensure that home remains pleasant. If he returns irritable, you provide calm. If he forgets an engagement, you remember it. If he invites 6 men to dinner without warning, you somehow turn this into soup. In a happy marriage, this arrangement may involve genuine partnership. Husbands and wives write affectionate letters, share jokes, discuss children, manage estates together, and rely deeply upon one another. Queen Victoria's public devotion to Prince Albert helps strengthen the ideal of marriage based on companionship and emotional attachment rather than family arrangement alone. Yet affection does not erase legal inequality. Under coverture, especially before reforms later in the century, a married woman's independent legal identity is absorbed into her husband's. Her property may become his. Her earnings may belong to him. She cannot always enter contracts or bring legal action in her own name. He has the stronger legal claim to the children and the marital home. You may control a large household while having limited control over the money supporting it. This is one of the quieter Victorian achievements, giving a woman responsibility for everything while ensuring that authority remains available elsewhere. Marriage settlements can protect some wealthy women. Before the wedding, lawyers may place property in trust, secure an allowance, or establish funds for future children. These protections depend upon wealth, planning, and male relatives who believe protection is necessary. If your marriage is kind, the legal imbalance may remain mostly invisible. If it is cruel, it becomes the architecture of your life. Divorce is possible but difficult, expensive, and scandalous. The Matrimonial Causes Act of 1857 moves divorce from Parliament into a civil court, making it more accessible than before, but husbands and wives do not enter that court on equal terms. A husband may seek divorce for adultery. A wife must generally prove adultery combined with an additional offence such as cruelty or desertion. Society does not need a court judgment to punish her. Gossip can begin much earlier. You therefore learn to exercise influence through timing. A request made directly may be refused. The same request mentioned gently after dinner, supported by a favourable letter and repeated during a carriage ride, may eventually become your husband's excellent suggestion. Today, you want repairs made to the nursery roof. You mention that the children's room was damp after last night's rain. He says the roof was repaired recently. You agree that it was. You add that the youngest coughed during breakfast. He lowers the newspaper. By evening, he will summon the steward and announce that the nursery roof must be examined immediately. You thank him for thinking of it. Domestic harmony is restored. Now the nursery door opens and the children arrive. If they are young, a nurse or nanny accompanies them. If they are older, the governess follows with an update on lessons, behaviour, and whichever child has recently declared war on French grammar. Wealthy mothers vary greatly in their involvement. Some spend hours with their children and supervise their education closely. Others see them at appointed times, receiving them after breakfast or before dinner, as though they are charming but unpredictable visitors. They are washed, brushed, and wearing clean clothes. You kiss them, ask about their studies, and attempt to determine whether the youngest is holding a dead beetle. He is. The Victorians are deeply interested in nature. The beetle is placed carefully on the table because crushing it would create tears, a stain, and possibly a lecture on cruelty to living creatures. Your son explains that it is extremely rare. The nurse gives you a look suggesting that it was found beneath the nursery cupboard and has several close relatives still living there. You admire it politely. Children in a wealthy Victorian household often spend much of their early lives in the nursery, a separate domestic kingdom positioned upstairs and managed by women. Babies are cared for by nurses. Older children eat nursery meals, sleep in nearby rooms, and follow routines arranged around lessons, walks, baths, prayers, and the prevention of permanent injury. The nursery has its own hierarchy. A head nurse or nanny may possess considerable authority, especially if she has served the family for years. Beneath her may be nursery maids responsible for washing clothes, carrying meals, cleaning rooms, and pursuing children who have discovered stairs. A trusted nanny can become one of the most emotionally important people in a child's life. She comforts illnesses, settles nightmares, supervises behaviour, and remembers who dislikes porridge. You are the mother, but she is often the person present when the child falls, wakes, cries, or decides at 3 a.m. that death is approaching because one sock feels different from the other. This distance between parent and child does not necessarily mean a lack of affection. Many wealthy Victorian parents adore their children, write tender letters to them, read aloud, supervise lessons, and spend regular time in the nursery. Others follow a more formal style inherited from earlier generations. Children are brought downstairs at particular hours, expected to behave beautifully, and removed once beauty begins becoming noise. Your eldest daughter performs a curtsy. The youngest attempts one while still watching the beetle and nearly places his forehead against a chair. The governess begins her report. The morning's arithmetic went well. Penmanship was satisfactory. Geography produced some confusion regarding the location of Portugal. French produced active resistance. Your daughter insists that French verbs are unreasonable. You understand the feeling but cannot support rebellion in front of the governess. You remind her that languages are useful and that a well-educated young lady should speak French gracefully. You do not mention that many English travellers speak it by increasing their volume and becoming offended when this fails. Your son has also received a lesson in natural history, which explains the beetle. Victorian children are encouraged to collect specimens, press flowers, classify shells, observe birds, and develop an improving interest in the natural world. A dead insect pinned neatly inside a cabinet is educational. The same insect walking across the breakfast cloth is a household failure. The children's clothing is clean and carefully arranged. Younger boys and girls may wear similar gowns during infancy. Boys are later breeched, moving into trousers in a small family milestone that confirms they have entered a more masculine stage of life and may now begin damaging furniture with greater authority. Girls remain in dresses, their clothing gradually becoming more structured as they age. Their posture, manners, speech, and movements are corrected early. Boys are expected to become disciplined, brave, and prepared for school. Girls are expected to become graceful, accomplished, and prepared for a drawing room in which someone will judge the way they pour tea. Childhood is affectionate, supervised, and steadily aimed toward adulthood. You ask whether they have been outside. The nurse says they walked in the garden before the rain. The youngest fell into a shrub, but no bones appear to have been affected. This counts as a successful excursion. The children are allowed to stay for several more minutes. Your daughter shows you her copybook. Your son asks whether the beetle may live in his pocket. You refuse on the reasonable grounds that his pocket already contains string, chalk, 2 stones, and something nobody wishes to identify. At last, the nurse gathers them. You kiss each forehead. The governess collects the copybook. The beetle is returned to a small box with air holes, a courtesy not extended to many insects collected by Victorian naturalists. The nursery procession disappears through the door. The room becomes quiet again. You have spent 20 minutes with your children and received reports on their health, education, posture, clothing, language skills, and insect management. Motherhood is proceeding according to schedule. Let us spend a moment with the governess, because she lives in your house while belonging fully to neither family nor servants. She is usually educated, respectable, and dependent on employment. She teaches your daughters languages, music, drawing, history, geography, and enough mathematics to be impressive without alarming future husbands. Your sons may remain under her care until they are sent to school and introduced to institutional cold baths. At dinner, she may eat alone or with older children. Below stairs, the servants consider her socially superior. Upstairs, guests consider her socially invisible. She occupies a narrow strip of Victorian society approximately the width of the schoolroom rug. Her position is delicate because she may come from a family very much like yours, except that something has gone financially wrong. Perhaps her father died without leaving enough money. Perhaps an investment failed. Perhaps there are several unmarried daughters and only one modest income between them. She has education, manners, and respectable connections, but none of the money required to make these things comfortable. Becoming a governess is one of the few acceptable ways for a middle-class woman to support herself without entering trade or domestic service. The work allows her to remain technically within genteel society, although that society keeps moving her chair slightly farther from the fire. You may address her as Miss Carter rather than by her first name. The children are expected to obey her. Servants are expected to treat her respectfully. Yet she possesses none of the security of a family member and little of the companionship found among servants below stairs. She may be invited into the drawing room when her pupils perform music or recite poetry. Guests smile at the children, praise their French, and then continue speaking as though Miss Carter has dissolved into the curtains. A gentleman may ask whether the children enjoy their lessons without looking at the woman who gives them. She answers anyway. The schoolroom is her principal territory. Maps hang on the walls. Copybooks lie stacked on a table. A globe waits in the corner, ready to reveal that the British Empire has placed itself confidently across a surprising amount of the planet. There are slates, ink bottles, music sheets, botanical samples, and perhaps a collection of improving books in which disobedient children meet consequences of remarkable efficiency. Her teaching day begins early. She supervises prayers, reading, handwriting, arithmetic, history, geography, music, and languages. A rich family may hire separate masters for accomplishments such as dancing, drawing, or advanced music, but the governess remains responsible for ensuring that the children are prepared, attentive, and not hiding beneath the piano. She must educate without becoming too familiar. She must discipline without appearing harsh. She must show affection without forgetting that the children are not hers. This is not always easy. A young pupil may adore her, confide in her, and depend upon her more than upon any relative. The same child may remind her during an argument that she is paid to be there, having learned social hierarchy with the speed children usually reserve for discovering forbidden cupboards. You may be kind to her. Many employers are. You may include her in family walks, provide a comfortable room, pay her regularly, and consult her seriously about the children's progress. Even kindness cannot entirely remove the imbalance. Her future depends upon your satisfaction and your reference. If dismissed without a good character, she may struggle to find another position. There is no pension, no formal protection, and no guarantee that the next household will be decent. Illness can end her employment. Age can narrow her prospects. Marriage may offer escape, though her isolated position gives her few opportunities to meet suitable men. Popular novels understand the governess's predicament very well. She appears again and again in Victorian fiction as intelligent, observant, lonely, and dangerously capable of noticing what the family would rather leave unexamined. She stands inside the household but outside its protections, which makes her an excellent witness and a deeply inconvenient person to underestimate. After the children leave, Miss Carter remains behind to speak with you. Your daughter is progressing well in music but rushes her scales. Your son has talent for geography and no respect for ink. She recommends a new French grammar and suggests that the children spend more time outdoors when the weather improves. You listen carefully. She spends more hours with them than you do and knows where their confidence is growing, where their tempers are forming, and which child has discovered the hidden shelf above the schoolroom cupboard. You thank her. She gives a small nod and gathers the copybooks against her chest. In a few minutes, she will return upstairs to teach the children about the great divisions of Victorian society. She does not need the textbook. The lessons reveal one of the central facts of your household. Your sons and daughters are being prepared for different worlds. A son may inherit property, attend university, enter parliament, join the army, practice law, manage estates, or spend several years losing money in ways described as youthful. A daughter is trained for marriage, household management, social poise, motherhood, and the careful display of accomplishments. She learns music, drawing, perhaps Italian, perhaps botany, always deportment. Too much knowledge may be considered unfeminine. Too little makes her dull. She must appear intelligent without causing anyone to experience the inconvenience of feeling challenged. Your eldest son studies Latin because the Romans have been dead for centuries and therefore represent a suitably safe foundation for masculine authority. He translates passages, memorizes dates, studies mathematics, and prepares for the possibility of public school, where the curriculum will be accompanied by cold dormitories, strict masters, older boys, compulsory games, and food designed to build character by resisting digestion. If the family is wealthy enough, he may eventually attend Oxford or Cambridge. There he can study classics, mathematics, theology, or law, develop useful connections, and discover that academic life contains a surprising amount of dining. A degree may lead toward the church, politics, the civil service, or one of the professions considered respectable for a gentleman. His future is spoken about as though it stretches naturally before him. Your daughter's future is discussed more carefully. She also studies history, literature, geography, and languages, but the purpose is different. Her education is not meant primarily to secure a profession. It is meant to make her cultivated, capable, and attractive within marriage. She should converse intelligently at dinner without turning conversation into competition. She should understand politics well enough to follow her husband's interests, but not so forcefully that he begins to suspect she has independent ones. This balance requires skill. A daughter may play the piano beautifully, but not with the intensity of a professional musician. She may paint watercolours, provided the landscapes remain calm and no one suggests exhibiting them commercially. She may speak French and Italian, sing, embroider, arrange flowers, and identify plants. These are accomplishments, a word that transforms sustained study into something pleasantly decorative. Her brother may practice the piano badly for 10 minutes and be praised for showing musical promise. She may practice for 3 hours and be reminded not to appear proud. The distinction is not absolute. Victorian women write books, conduct scientific work, campaign for reform, manage property, establish schools, and enter public life in growing numbers. Women such as Elizabeth Garrett Anderson push into medicine. Girton College opens at Cambridge in 1869, offering women higher education despite considerable resistance. Educational opportunities expand steadily across the century. Yet progress remains uneven, and your household may regard these developments with the cautious interest reserved for a new machine that might explode. You want your daughter educated. You do not want society to punish her for seeming too educated. You therefore supervise a curriculum designed to create capability without visible ambition. She reads serious books, though certain novels may be discouraged because fiction is believed capable of exciting the imagination, troubling the nerves, and producing opinions. She studies science, though perhaps through botany rather than anatomy. Flowers are considered suitable. Human bodies introduce the possibility that someone might learn something useful. Her brother's errors are temporary. He has time to recover from laziness, failed examinations, debts, unsuitable friendships, and several years of being described as unsettled. Your daughter's mistakes may become permanent social evidence. A flirtation, an indiscreet letter, a rumour, or an attachment to the wrong man can affect her marriage prospects. Her education therefore includes self-command. She learns when to speak, when to smile, how to enter a room, how to leave one, and how to show interest without appearing eager. Even posture becomes preparation for the future. She sits straight, walks smoothly, and handles a teacup without allowing it to reveal distress. Deportment lessons teach the body to perform calmness regardless of what the mind is doing. You watch her at the schoolroom table. She is reading more quickly than her brother and has already corrected one of his geographical mistakes. He objects. She smiles with the quiet satisfaction of someone who knows the map is on her side. The governess hides her amusement. In several years, your son may leave for university and be congratulated for beginning his life. Your daughter may enter society and be congratulated for becoming eligible to merge hers with someone else's. Both are loved. Only one is being taught to own the future. It is time for morning calls, which naturally take place after noon because Victorian society has developed language primarily to test whether you are paying attention. You change into an appropriate visiting dress, put on gloves and a bonnet, and enter the carriage. Calls are brief, generally around 15 minutes, unless the relationship is intimate or the conversation becomes impossible to escape. You discuss health, weather, travel, engagements, acquaintances, and nothing that sounds remotely like the actual concerns governing anyone's life. Tea may be offered. You must know when to leave. Staying too long suggests idleness. Leaving too soon suggests offence. The correct duration is exactly long enough to be pleasant and short enough to be discussed afterward. Your visiting dress must be respectable without appearing as though you have mistaken the afternoon for a ball. The fabric is attractive but practical, the neckline high, and the bonnet arranged to survive a carriage journey without surrendering its flowers to the wind. Your gloves are clean, because bare hands in formal social life carry a dangerous suggestion that you may recently have touched something. The carriage stops outside the first house. A footman descends, knocks, and waits to discover whether the lady is at home. This does not necessarily mean whether she is physically inside the building. She may be seated 10 yards from the front door and still be not at home, which is a social condition rather than a geographical one. Her servant understands the distinction. So do you. Victorian society has developed an entire protective system for avoiding people without requiring anyone to admit that avoidance is happening. Today, she is at home. You enter a drawing room arranged to communicate wealth, taste, and the complete absence of domestic effort. The fire burns evenly. The furniture is placed just so. Fresh flowers appear on a table. Although it is February and their presence has involved heated glass houses, gardeners, and considerable private expense. Your hostess rises to greet you. You exchange remarks about the weather. It is damp. It was damp yesterday. It may improve tomorrow, though nobody wishes to appear reckless. Weather is dependable conversation because everyone experiences it, and nobody can be blamed for it, apart from the government in extreme cases. You ask after her husband. He is very busy. She asks after yours. He is also very busy. Neither man's activity is described because important male business grows more impressive when kept vague. The conversation moves to mutual acquaintances. Mrs. Harcourt has returned from Bath looking much improved. This may mean her health is better, her clothes are newer, or the speaker has found no visible evidence of decline. Her daughter is rumoured to be engaged, though nothing has been formally announced. You therefore discuss the matter without discussing it. You say the young man appears attentive. Your hostess says he has excellent prospects. Neither of you says that his father owns several profitable factories and that this has improved his personality considerably. A maid enters with tea. Cups are poured. You accept one, although drinking it creates a timing problem. Leaving too quickly after accepting refreshment may appear abrupt. Remaining until the cup is empty may add 7 minutes to the call and expose you to a detailed account of someone's digestive health. Your hostess begins describing her sister's nerves. You take a careful sip. Victorian health conversation is both restrained and astonishingly thorough. Illness may be referred to delicately, but once the subject is admitted, symptoms arrive in battalions. Digestion, headaches, sleeplessness, palpitations, weakness, and the mysterious condition known simply as being poorly may occupy an afternoon without anyone naming an organ. You offer sympathy while keeping one eye on the clock. 14 minutes have passed. A slight pause in conversation presents itself. You rise smoothly before anyone can introduce another relative's condition. Your hostess expresses regret that you must leave. You express regret that you cannot stay. Both statements are gracious. Neither requires investigation. At the next house, the lady is not at home. You leave your card. At the third, you discover 2 other callers already seated in the drawing room. This changes the atmosphere immediately. Conversation becomes more general and less dangerous because no one wishes to provide material that can travel in 3 directions before dinner. A young widow speaks about a concert. An older woman mentions a new family in the neighbourhood. Their money comes from trade, which is said with the careful neutrality normally used when reporting unusual weather at sea. You ask whether they are agreeable. The older woman says they seem very pleasant. This means no conclusion has yet been reached. After 13 minutes, you leave. Your carriage moves on. By late afternoon, you have visited 4 houses, entered 2, missed 1 hostess, avoided another, drunk half a cup of tea, and exchanged no information that would appear important to an outsider. Yet invitations have been encouraged, alliances maintained, illnesses acknowledged, courtships assessed, and 1 newly wealthy family placed under social observation. You return home exhausted. Nothing has happened. Everyone will hear about it. Before entering a house, you consider the calling card. These small pieces of engraved paper carry an astonishing amount of social meaning. A card left in person differs from one delivered by a servant. Corners may be turned according to custom. Names may be included or omitted. A married woman's card reflects her husband's identity because marriage has efficiently absorbed her into his printed stationery. Cards acknowledge arrivals, departures, condolences, congratulations, and attempts at acquaintance. If your call is not returned, a message has been delivered without anyone having spoken. Victorian society has invented passive aggression on excellent paper stock. Your card is small, stiff, and carefully engraved. It bears your married name in elegant lettering, perhaps Mrs. Henry Ashcombe. even though Henry is currently nowhere near the carriage and has made no contribution to this visit beyond possessing a name. Your own Christian name has become socially unnecessary. Marriage has not erased you completely. It has merely filed you beneath your husband for easier reference. You keep the cards in a decorative case made from silver, ivory, leather, tortoiseshell, or mother of pearl. The case itself may be admired when opened, because even the object holding your social identity must quietly communicate income. Your footman waits beside the carriage while you decide which message the card must deliver. If you are making an ordinary call and the family is not at home, the card may be left with the servant who answers the door. If the card is delivered by your servant while you remain elsewhere, the gesture may carry less personal warmth. The distinction is subtle, but subtle distinctions are where Victorian society keeps most of its weapons. Customs vary by decade and social circle. A folded or turned corner may indicate that you have called personally, rather than merely sending the card. Different corners are sometimes associated with particular meanings such as congratulations, condolence, farewell, or a general visit. Etiquette manuals attempt to explain these signals with complete confidence, though their advice does not always agree. This is reassuring. Even the Victorians occasionally purchase a guide to proper behaviour and emerge less certain than before. A married couple may leave several cards. Your husband's card may be intended for the gentleman of the house. Yours is left for the lady. Additional cards may acknowledge daughters old enough to receive visitors. The exact arrangement depends upon who is being recognised, who is being avoided, and how much engraved paper everyone has brought. When a new family arrives in the neighbourhood, cards begin the delicate process of determining whether acquaintance will occur. You may leave yours as a gesture of welcome. They are then expected to return the call within a suitable period. If they fail to do so, the silence can mean illness, absence, confusion, social hesitation, or rejection. Naturally, everyone assumes rejection first. The card tray in an entrance hall becomes a visible record of social connection. Visitors may notice the names displayed there. A card from a duchess is not placed beneath one from the dentist unless the household has lost control of its priorities. Cards also announce temporary movements. Before leaving town for the season, you may write PPC in one corner from the French phrase pour prendre congé, meaning that you are taking your leave. This allows you to say farewell without personally enduring every farewell conversation, one of civilization's clearer advances. Mourning requires its own paper. A black border may appear around the card, its width changing according to the depth or stage of grief. The card communicates loss before the servant reading it has reached the name. Victorian mourning is deeply emotional, socially regulated, and equipped with stationery for every phase. You arrive at the home of a woman whose invitation you have neglected to answer promptly. She is not receiving callers today. Perhaps she is genuinely unavailable. Perhaps she has seen your carriage from the upstairs window and made a decision. You hand your card to the footman. After a moment's thought, you add a few handwritten words expressing regret that you missed her. This softens the delay without admitting fault and opens the possibility that she will return your call. If she does, harmony is restored. If she does not, you will encounter one another eventually at a dinner, concert, church service, or charitable committee. Both of you will behave pleasantly. The absent return call will sit between you like a small, beautifully engraved piece of furniture. The front door closes. Your card enters the house in your place. It is quieter than you are and may cause considerably more trouble. Back in the carriage, you roll through streets filled with wheels, hoofbeats, shouting vendors, smoke, manure, and pedestrians who have learned to move quickly when wealth approaches. The carriage is transportation, privacy, and public advertisement. Its condition, horses, driver, and liveried servants communicate your status before anyone sees your face. In London during the season, particular routes become slow-moving exhibitions of rank. You sit upright behind glass, dressed for observation, passing other families who are also pretending they have not deliberately come to be observed. Traffic is terrible, but it is socially productive. Your carriage may be a brougham, landau, barouche, Victoria, or another design selected according to weather, purpose, and how much attention you intend to attract. A closed brougham provides privacy and shelter. An open carriage offers fresh air, a clear view, and the opportunity for half of London to assess your bonnet before luncheon. The vehicle itself is only the beginning. Horses must be purchased, housed, fed, groomed, exercised, and replaced when age or illness makes continued work impossible. Harnesses require cleaning. Wheels need repairs, leather cracks, iron fittings loosen. Carriages spend much of their lives discovering expensive new sounds. A wealthy household may maintain several horses and vehicles for different uses. The carriage house and stable form their own busy department, supervised by a coachman who understands horses, weather, routes, and the household's movements better than many relatives do. Beneath him may be grooms, stable boys, and helpers who rise early to feed animals that do not respect the social season. Your coachman sits high above the street in a heavy coat, holding the reins with calm authority. A footman may stand behind or sit beside him, dressed in livery chosen to reflect the family colours. His presence is practical but also decorative. He opens doors, assists you in and out, carries messages, and communicates through his mere existence that you do not travel alone like someone with errands. The carriage joins a stream of omnibuses, cabs, carts, private vehicles, delivery wagons, and riders. Every wheel strikes stone. Iron shoes ring against the road. Drivers call out warnings. Vendors shout over the noise. Somewhere nearby a horse objects to modernity. London traffic can slow almost to stillness. Narrow streets designed for an earlier city now carry the movement of a metropolis swollen by industry, commerce, and people who all seem to need to cross the same junction at once. A short journey may take an hour. The wealthy endure this inconvenience from cushioned seats. Everyone else experiences it closer to the wheels. The smell enters even through a closed carriage. Thousands of horses produce an impressive daily quantity of manure, which gathers on roads despite constant efforts to remove it. Rain turns it into mud. Dry weather turns it into dust. Either form eventually reaches your clothing. You carry a handkerchief scented with lavender or violet water. This helps in the same way that placing one flower beside a stable helps. As your carriage passes through a fashionable district, the traffic becomes less about reaching a destination and more about being present. Hyde Park and Rotten Row serve as stages for the wealthy. Families drive slowly along prescribed routes while riders display horses, clothes, confidence, and the ability to appear entirely casual under concentrated observation. You recognize another carriage approaching. The woman inside is a distant acquaintance. There is time for one precise exchange. You incline your head. She responds. Too much enthusiasm would suggest intimacy. Too little would suggest offence. The wheels continue moving before either of you can reconsider the angle. A second carriage passes. You do not recognize its occupants, but the horses are excellent and the footman wears striking livery. This is enough information to begin speculation. A third belongs to a family newly arrived from the north. Their fortune comes from manufacturing. Their carriage is magnificent, perhaps too magnificent, which society interprets as evidence that the money is new and therefore still excited. Old wealth prefers its luxury slightly tired. Your own carriage says more than you intend. Fresh paint and polished brass suggest prosperity. Well-matched horses suggest taste. A worn interior may indicate economy, neglect, or a husband who believes upholstery should last longer than human enthusiasm. Privacy inside the carriage is relative. Passing pedestrians cannot hear you, but the coachman may. The footman certainly knows where you have gone, how long you stayed, and whether you returned looking pleased. Servants are expected to forget these observations immediately. Some achieve this until another servant asks. At last the carriage turns toward home. You have crossed several miles, exchanged 4 bows, recognized 2 enemies, inspected one possible bridegroom from a safe distance, and learned from the traffic outside Lady Pembroke's house that she is receiving more callers than expected. You step down with the footman's help. The carriage rolls away toward the stable, carrying mud, dust, and several new maintenance problems. You have completed a journey across London. More importantly, London has seen you do it. Now you go shopping. Bond Street, Regent Street, or a fashionable local district offers dressmakers, milliners, jewellers, booksellers, glovers, perfumers, and shops devoted to objects you did not know existed until they became indispensable. You select fabric, inspect trims, order gloves, and discuss alterations with women whose livelihood depends on predicting what you will dislike next month. You do not usually carry purchases through the street. Goods are delivered to the house, where the bill may arrive later and behave like a distant relative who has suddenly remembered you. The shopping is elegant. The accounting is pursued by other departments. The carriage stops before a fashionable draper's shop, and the footman opens the door. You step down carefully, gathering your skirt so that the bustle clears the carriage without attempting to remain behind. Shop windows display folded silks, ribbons, lace, fans, parasols, and decorative objects arranged with the confidence that every passing woman has recently discovered a serious shortage of decorative objects. Modern department stores are beginning to transform shopping during the later Victorian period. Establishments grow larger, brighter, and more respectable, offering women a public space where they may browse without entering the rougher commercial world of warehouses and markets. Gas lighting illuminates displays. Plate glass windows turn goods into theatre. Fixed prices gradually replace some of the old bargaining, allowing money to leave your household with greater efficiency. Inside, a shop assistant greets you with professional warmth. He recognizes your maid, remembers your account, and behaves as though the arrival of another woman requiring blue silk is the most promising event of his week. Bolts of fabric are carried to the counter. Silk, satin, velvet, wool, cotton, and fine muslin unfold beneath your hand. You feel the weight, examine the weave, and hold colours near your face while your maid watches with the concentration of someone who knows she will eventually have to keep the finished garment clean. A fashionable shade may have an alarming name. Paris green is vivid, modern, and produced using arsenic compounds. Other artificial dyes created by the expanding chemical industry offer brilliant purples, reds, and blues previously difficult or costly to achieve. The colours are exciting. Their relationship with skin, factory workers, and general human survival is still being negotiated. You select a safer shade of blue. The assistant says it is extremely fashionable. This may be true. It may also be the sentence attached to every fabric that has remained on the shelf since spring. Next comes lace. Handmade lace is expensive and admired, while machine-made varieties have made decorative trimming more widely available. A wealthy woman may use lace at collars, cuffs, sleeves, bodices, undergarments, caps, and any other place where plain fabric appears dangerously close to completing its task without assistance. You choose a narrow trim, then a wider one, then return to the narrow one after several minutes of serious reflection. The assistant folds both options aside because he understands that the decision may reverse again before you leave. At the milliner's, the discussion becomes more architectural. Bonnet shapes change with fashion, and each requires ribbons, flowers, feathers, veils, and careful positioning. A hat must flatter your face, suit the season, coordinate with the dress, and survive being placed inside a carriage already occupied by your bustle. The milliner suggests artificial cherries. You look at them. Your maid looks at them. The cherries are removed. Gloves are ordered by size and purpose. Pale kid gloves suit formal visits and evening events. Darker or sturdier pairs serve for walking and travel. Gloves protect the hands, complete the outfit, and maintain the reassuring Victorian principle that respectable skin should encounter as little of the outside world as possible. At the perfumer's, you inspect soaps, sachets, hair oils, violet water, rose scents, and small bottles promising beauty, freshness, and discretion. Everything is presented in cut glass, painted porcelain, or decorated boxes. A product becomes twice as convincing once it is placed inside packaging too attractive to discard. You also stop at the bookseller. Novels, travel accounts, religious works, poetry, household manuals, and new periodicals fill the shelves. You choose a volume for yourself and an improving book for your daughter, who will correctly identify which is which within seconds. Throughout the afternoon, purchases are recorded against your household account. Cash may change hands for smaller items, but established customers often receive credit. Bills are sent later, sometimes monthly or quarterly, allowing the pleasure of acquiring an object to become completely separated from the discomfort of paying for it. Packages are wrapped and labelled for delivery. You leave carrying only a parasol and the calm expression of someone who has purchased almost nothing. By evening, boxes will begin arriving at the house. By the end of the month, so will the consequences. The afternoon may include charitable work. Wealthy Victorian women participate extensively in philanthropy, visiting poor families, supporting hospitals, organising bazaars, distributing food, funding schools, and joining societies devoted to everything from fallen women to injured cab horses. Much of this work is sincere, practical, and vital. It may also arrive wrapped in moral judgment. A poor mother receiving coal or blankets can expect questions about cleanliness, church attendance, alcohol, child discipline, and whether she is grateful in the correct emotional register. You have come to relieve suffering, but Victorian charity likes to examine the suffering first. You change into a plain but respectable walking dress, because arriving in silk and diamonds to discuss another family's lack of bread would display poor judgment even by the flexible standards of wealth. Your bonnet is modest, your gloves dark, and your basket packed with food, medicine, religious tracts, and several opinions nobody has specifically requested. A district visitor or local clergyman's wife may accompany you. She carries a notebook containing names, addresses, family circumstances, and observations about character. Victorian philanthropy enjoys records. Poverty is distressing, but poverty arranged alphabetically can at least be discussed by committee. Your carriage takes you toward a poorer neighbourhood, though you may leave it at a discreet distance and continue on foot. The streets narrow. Smoke hangs between the buildings. Children play beside drains. Laundry stretches overhead where sunlight might have been if the city had not already used most of it for factories. You reach a cramped house divided among several families. The woman you have come to visit lives in one room with her children. Her husband has been ill and unable to work. Rent is overdue. Coal is running low. The youngest child coughs beneath a blanket that has been repaired so many times the original cloth has become more of a rumour. You offer the basket. She thanks you. Now the questions begin. Has her husband sought work? Does he drink? Are the children attending school? Does the family attend church? Is the room always kept in this condition? Has she attempted greater economy? Greater economy is an ambitious suggestion to someone whose supper consists of bread and tea. You ask gently, because you are not cruel. You genuinely want to help. You have been taught, however, that charity must distinguish between the deserving and undeserving poor. The deserving poor are sober, grateful, industrious, clean, religious, and temporarily unfortunate. The undeserving poor possess faults, which is awkward because nearly everyone possesses faults and poverty makes them harder to hide. There is also fear that careless giving encourages dependence. Assistance should relieve distress without making distress attractive, a concern generally expressed by people whose own meals arrive beneath silver covers. So aid may come with conditions. Coal tickets, food vouchers, blankets, and rent support are offered after investigation. Visitors inspect homes and report whether families appear respectable. A clean room can strengthen a claim. An empty gin bottle can destroy it. The fact that clean water, soap, time, privacy, and hope are themselves easier to maintain with money is not always included in the report. Still, the practical help matters. A bag of coal means warmth. A loaf means food tonight. A subscription to a hospital may provide treatment. A place at a charitable school may give a child basic education and a path toward better employment. Women's philanthropic networks raise large sums and create institutions that government either cannot or will not provide. You may support lying-in charities for poor mothers, orphanages, ragged schools, convalescent homes, refuges, missions and hospitals. You may organise a bazaar where embroidered cushions, preserves, flowers, and handmade goods are sold beneath bunting, while respectable people spend an afternoon purchasing objects they do not need for causes they sincerely value. These bazaars require months of planning. Committees are formed, duties are assigned, invitations are printed, stalls are decorated. Arguments develop over table positions, refreshments, and whether Lady Beatrice's contribution can reasonably be described as handmade when everyone knows her maid completed most of it. Philanthropy gives wealthy women a rare route into public organisation. You manage money, lead committees, correspond with officials, recruit volunteers, inspect institutions, and influence social policy while describing all of it as an extension of feminine kindness. The language remains domestic. The work is not. Before leaving the room, you notice the child's cough again. You arrange for a doctor connected with the local charity to visit and tell the mother that more coal will be sent. She thanks you with visible relief. You resist asking whether the gratitude is sufficiently correct. Outside, your companion writes several notes in her book. The family is considered worthy of continued assistance. Their curtains are clean. The husband's illness appears genuine. The children were polite. You return to the carriage feeling useful, troubled, and faintly ashamed of how closely kindness has been supervised. The basket is empty. The questions remain. You return home for luncheon, a meal considered informal because fewer than 12 pieces of silver may be required. Cold meats, fish, pies, fruit, bread, cheese, and light dishes appear, depending on the household. Children may join you. A close friend may remain after calling. Your husband may appear unexpectedly and ask whether anything has happened, as though the morning's domestic administration, correspondence, shopping, education, and charitable work were weather conditions rather than events. You say that nothing much has happened. This is the traditional answer given by the person who has prevented the house from collapsing. Luncheon has developed from the lighter midday refreshments of earlier generations into a recognized meal among fashionable families. It usually takes place sometime between 1 and 2, although the exact hour depends on when breakfast ended, when dinner will begin, and whether anyone in the household has managed to maintain a stable relationship with time. Unlike the formal dinner awaiting you this evening, luncheon is meant to feel relaxed. The tablecloth is laid, the silver polished, and the dishes arranged with considerable care, but nobody has printed a menu or hired additional footmen. This is Victorian informality, where the servants have merely worked very hard to create the impression that nobody has made an effort. You remove your gloves and take your place at the table. A cold chicken appears beside slices of ham and tongue. There may be a raised pie filled with game or meat, its pastry crust sturdy enough to survive railway transport and possibly a minor flood. A dish of fish sits nearby with boiled potatoes, bread, pickles, and salad leaves that look clean because the kitchen staff has washed them with greater confidence than scientific understanding. The refrigerator has not yet become a normal household appliance, though wealthier homes may possess ice chests or cool larders. Food left from the previous evening must be used intelligently and quickly. Luncheon gives the cook an opportunity to return yesterday's roast in a new form, often surrounded by pastry, sauce, or enough parsley to suggest that no one has seen it before. You recognize part of last night's beef beneath a layer of aspic. The beef recognizes you as well. Your daughter joins you with the governess. She sits neatly, unfolds her napkin, and accepts a small portion of chicken. Her younger brother arrives moments later under the supervision of his nurse, carrying no visible beetles but wearing the expression of someone who has placed one elsewhere for safekeeping. Children may dine separately in the nursery, especially when young, but luncheon offers a convenient occasion for them to join the family without being exposed to the full ceremony of dinner. They are expected to practice manners, answer questions, and avoid discussing bodily functions while adults are eating. The youngest announces that the nursery cat has been sick beneath the schoolroom piano. The nurse closes her eyes briefly. You redirect the conversation toward geography. A close friend may also be present, having stayed after her morning call stretched beyond the formal limit. With intimate acquaintances, the stiff rules soften. Bonnets may be removed. Conversation becomes more candid. Servants remain within hearing distance, so complete honesty is still not recommended, but you may now admit that Lady Beatrice's planned musical evening fills you with concern. Your friend agrees. Lady Beatrice's niece sings. This fact settles the matter. A footman offers wine, though many women choose water, tea, or another light drink during the day. Your friend accepts a little sherry. You take tea because the charitable visit has left you tired, and tea remains the British answer to fatigue, grief, weather, awkwardness, and the possibility that someone may begin singing later. Then your husband enters. He was not expected. The cook was not warned. Yet a place appears almost immediately because servants are trained to respond to surprise as though surprise had booked ahead. He sits, accepts cold beef, and asks whether your morning has been pleasant. You mention the household accounts, the departing kitchen maid, the children's lessons, several calls, shopping, correspondence, and the poor family who requires coal. He nods while adding mustard. Nothing much, then. You look at him. Your friend looks at her plate. The governess studies the bread with renewed scholarly interest. You agree that nothing much has happened. Your husband begins describing a disagreement at his club, involving the placement of a newspaper. This, apparently, has occupied several respectable men for nearly an hour, and may have lasting consequences. You listen patiently. The cold chicken is cleared. Cheese and fruit arrive. The children are dismissed before the youngest can reveal any further developments involving the cat. Soon your husband leaves again, strengthened by luncheon, and entirely unaware that the household came within one resignation, one unpaid bill, and one medical cough of requiring his attention. You finish your tea. It has been a quiet morning. The house is still standing, which is why nobody noticed your work. Later comes tea, one of the most efficient institutions in British history. By the middle of the century, afternoon tea has become fashionable among the wealthy, offering bread, butter, cakes, sandwiches, and a socially acceptable reason to gather before dinner. The room is comfortable, the china is delicate, and the conversation moves quietly through engagements, marriages, illnesses, inheritances, servants, scandals, and the moral decline of people not currently present. You pour because the role of hostess is both symbolic and practical. Milk, sugar, strength, and order of service are remembered. By the second cup, everyone knows who has separated from whom, although nobody has used the word separated. The tea table has been arranged in the drawing room near the fire. A white cloth covers a low table. Cups stand in their saucers. Small plates wait beside folded napkins, silver teaspoons, sugar tongs, and a bowl of milk whose position may cause several later generations to argue about whether milk should enter the cup before or after the tea. In your house, tea enters first. This is not necessarily a political position, though society may treat it like one. The footman brings in the kettle, but you control the teapot. Tea remains expensive enough, especially earlier in the century, for the mistress of the house to supervise it personally. In many wealthy households, tea is kept in a locked caddy, protected alongside sugar and other small goods that servants are believed capable of consuming the instant moral supervision weakens. You measure the leaves into the warmed pot. Black tea from China remains common, while increasing quantities arrive from British-controlled plantations in India and Ceylon later in the century. The empire is present in the room, though it has been reduced to a fragrant brown liquid served beside sponge cake. Hot water follows. The leaves steep. Your first visitor prefers weak tea with milk and no sugar. The second takes strong tea with 2 lumps. An elderly aunt asks for lemon, which creates a small disturbance because lemon has not been placed on the table, and someone must now locate one without suggesting that the household was unprepared. You remember every preference. This is part of being a good hostess. You must make hospitality look effortless while silently tracking cups, relationships, rivalries, dietary dislikes, mourning periods, and which guest should never be seated near the woman in green. The food is arranged in modest portions. Thin sandwiches may contain cucumber, watercress, egg, or potted meat. Bread and butter appear in neat slices. There are scones, buns, biscuits, seed cake, or small pastries, depending on the cook's skill and the seriousness of the gathering. Afternoon tea is not yet the enormous tiered ceremony later hotels will sell to tourists. It is a light private meal, useful for bridging the long distance between luncheon and a dinner that may not begin until 8. The first guest asks whether you have heard from Mrs. Harcourt. You say you have not. The second guest says, Mrs. Harcourt is staying with her mother. Your aunt remarks that it must be pleasant for her mother. This sentence lands softly and destroys an entire marriage. Nobody asks why Mrs. Harcourt is not staying with her husband. Nobody mentions that her trunks arrived at her mother's house 2 days ago. Nobody says that a gentleman matching her husband's description has been seen frequently with a young widow near Richmond. The facts are placed gently around the room, like pieces of furniture everyone agrees not to identify. You refill the cups. Gossip in polite society is rarely announced as gossip. It arrives as concern. Someone hopes a friend is well. Someone has heard an unfortunate report and wishes sincerely that it is untrue. Someone feels obliged to mention a rumour only so that nobody present is surprised when the rumour becomes public. This allows the speaker to distribute scandal while maintaining the expression of a person attempting to contain it. Servants receive equal attention. Lady Pembroke's cook has resigned. Mrs. Bell's new footman is too handsome, which is said as though his face represents a practical defect. A parlour maid has been dismissed after being found wearing her mistress's brooch, though one guest believes the brooch may have been given to her by the mistress's son. There is a pause. The cake suddenly becomes very interesting. You steer the conversation toward an upcoming engagement. The young woman's family is delighted. The young man has good prospects. His manners are acceptable. His mother is difficult, but mothers are not included in marriage settlements even when they clearly intend to move in emotionally. By the second pot, the gathering has reviewed 2 engagements, 1 inheritance, 3 illnesses, a departing cook, a questionable footman, and the possible collapse of the Harcourt marriage. No voice has risen. No vulgar word has been used. Your youngest guest places her cup down and says what a quiet week it has been. Everyone agrees. Outside the drawing room, the footman carries away an empty cake plate. By dinner, the servants' hall will possess its own version of everything discussed, with several details corrected and others improved for narrative clarity. You pour the final cup. The tea has grown weaker. The information has not. When guests depart, you may take up needlework. Embroidery, mending, crochet, knitting, and decorative sewing are respectable accomplishments because idle hands remain suspicious even when attached to a woman with 20 servants. You work on slippers, cushions, screens, gifts, clothing for the poor, or objects whose primary purpose is to demonstrate that you have worked on them. The motions are quiet and repetitive. Thread moves through fabric while someone reads aloud nearby. You are productive without appearing employed, which is the narrow and highly upholstered space Victorian femininity has prepared for you. Your work basket sits beside the chair, fitted with compartments for needles, scissors, thread, silk, thimbles, buttons, and several unfinished projects whose optimism has survived longer than their practical purpose. The basket itself may be lined with satin and decorated with embroidery, because even the equipment used to create decorative objects must first become a decorative object. You choose a square of canvas intended for a footstool. The pattern shows roses, leaves, and a small bird with the fixed expression of something that knows it will spend the next 40 years beneath someone's boots. Berlin wool work is particularly fashionable during much of the century. Printed patterns allow women to reproduce colourful designs in bright wool on canvas. Flowers, animals, landscapes, religious scenes, and sentimental messages appear on cushions, fire screens, slippers, bell pulls, and chair covers. A drawing room can gradually fill with enough embroidered foliage to suggest that the garden has entered through the windows and become padded. The work is repetitive but soothing. You bring the needle through the canvas, draw the wool tight, and place the next stitch beside it. There is satisfaction in watching colour accumulate in orderly rows. Nothing argues. Nothing submits an invoice. The small bird remains exactly where you placed it. A friend may read aloud while you sew. Novels, letters, newspaper articles, sermons, or travel accounts provide entertainment, while everyone's hands remain occupied. Reading silently for hours may be interpreted as indulgent. Listening to a novel while producing a cushion converts the same pleasure into evidence of discipline. You may also make gifts. Embroidered slippers are presented to husbands, fathers, clergymen, and other men whose feet have somehow become appropriate sites for feminine devotion. Handkerchief cases, watch pockets, braces, pen wipers, and decorative covers appear at birthdays and Christmas. The recipient admires the craftsmanship, thanks you warmly, and later attempts to determine what the object is for. Not all sewing is ornamental. You may mend a small tear, stitch a child's garment, or oversee repairs performed by your maid. Yet, in a rich household, the relentless practical sewing falls largely to servants and professional workers. Laundry maids repair linen. Ladies' maids alter gowns. Seamstresses produce clothing for long hours and modest wages in cramped rooms where elegance is manufactured under conditions that elegance prefers not to visit. Your decorative needlework belongs to a different category. It demonstrates patience, taste, control, and useful femininity without suggesting financial necessity. The same skill performed for wages changes its social meaning immediately. Sewing for pleasure is an accomplishment. Sewing because rent is due is work, and polite society becomes less interested in praising it. Charitable sewing provides another respectable outlet. You may join a group producing shirts, blankets, baby clothes, or simple garments for poor families. The women gather around a table, stitching while discussing parish needs, local illnesses, and the alarming behaviour of people absent from the room. The clothing is genuinely useful. A warm garment can matter greatly to a family facing winter with little money. Yet charity committees sometimes devote surprising attention to whether recipients deserve the items and whether the pattern encourages sufficient modesty. Even a petticoat may arrive carrying judgment. By the later Victorian period, sewing machines are becoming increasingly common. They speed up garment construction and domestic work, though early machines can be costly and are occasionally treated with suspicion. Some fear they will damage women's health, others fear they will replace hand sewing. Mostly, they replace a great deal of time spent making identical stitches while trying not to resent the person who requested another shirt. Your work continues as afternoon light fades. The rose gains another row of red wool. The bird acquires half a wing. Your fingers move automatically while conversation drifts around the room. At last, you place the canvas back in the basket. Several hours of labour have produced a small patch of colour no larger than your palm. The footstool may be finished by Christmas. Nobody has specified which Christmas. The afternoon stretches on, and you turn to reading, music, or drawing. A cultivated woman is expected to possess accomplishments. You may play the piano, sing, sketch landscapes, arrange flowers, study languages, or read novels while insisting they are not affecting your nerves. Intellectual life is available, but it comes with boundaries. Serious scholarship may be admired in private and questioned in public. A woman who reads widely is interesting until she develops opinions. You therefore learn the Victorian art of appearing thoughtful in a manner that causes no immediate structural damage to the room. You settle into a chair beside the window with a newly published novel resting in your lap. The light is beginning to soften, although there is still enough of it to read without lighting the gas and filling the room with the faint possibility of explosion. Novels are enormously popular, but they carry a complicated reputation. Some people consider them improving, especially when they contain moral lessons, unfortunate marriages, and at least one person dying after recognizing the error of selfish behavior. Others fear that fiction encourages women to become emotional, dissatisfied, romantic, or dangerously interested in lives beyond their own drawing rooms. You read anyway. The book may have arrived in 3 volumes, the standard form for many fashionable novels. Purchasing all 3 is expensive, so you may borrow them from a circulating library such as Moody's, which supplies respectable households with carefully selected reading material. Moody's influence is considerable. A book accepted by the library may reach thousands of readers. One rejected for improper content may discover that Victorian morality has quietly removed most of its market. The rules of propriety, therefore, extend even into imaginary lives. You turn another page. The heroine has entered a dark corridor despite clear evidence that nothing useful has ever happened in a dark corridor. You approve of her courage while privately questioning her judgment. Your daughter may read the same novel later, though perhaps not before you have inspected it. A young woman should be protected from coarse language, explicit vice, and any plot that suggests marriage is not the inevitable reward for good behaviour. She may read about murder, poverty, betrayal, madness, and social ruin, provided the author handles them with moral seriousness and nobody explains the physical details too clearly. After several chapters, you close the book and move to the piano. A wealthy household often owns one, displayed in the drawing room as both instrument and evidence. Piano lessons begin early for girls of your class. Music demonstrates discipline, refinement, and the ability to entertain guests when conversation has exhausted the weather. You arrange the sheet music and begin. Your playing is skilled because you have spent years practicing scales while other people described it as a pleasant accomplishment. You may perform songs by Schubert, Mendelssohn, or popular British composers, adjusting the selection according to your ability and the tolerance of anyone nearby. Professional ambition would be less suitable. Performing for family and guests is elegant. Accepting money for doing it changes the moral atmosphere with surprising speed. You play through the piece while your maid enters quietly to adjust the fire. The music moves across the room, gentle and ordered, covering the scrape of the coal scuttle and the distant ring of a servant's bell. Perhaps you sing next. Your voice does not need to fill a concert hall. It needs to remain tuneful, feminine, and unlikely to suggest dangerous levels of confidence. Drawing follows the same principle. You may sketch flowers, ruins, children, coastlines, and quiet landscapes. Watercolour is particularly suitable. Oils are messier, more professional, and inclined to produce strong smells and stronger opinions. You take out a sketchbook and begin outlining a vase of flowers. The arrangement is carefully informal, meaning the gardener selected the blooms, a maid carried them upstairs, and you spent several minutes moving one rose until it appeared to have fallen naturally into the correct position. Science may also enter your afternoon in acceptable forms. Botany is popular because flowers allow intellectual curiosity without alarming anyone. You may classify plants, study ferns, collect shells, or read about geology. Discussions of fossils and the age of the Earth become increasingly lively during the century, particularly after Charles Darwin publishes On the Origin of Species in 1859. You may find these ideas fascinating. At dinner, however, you introduce them carefully. A woman who asks an intelligent question is charming. A woman who explains the answer risks becoming educational, and nobody has invited education to dessert. The daylight fades. You close the sketchbook, leaving the flowers unfinished but recognizably respectable. The novel waits beside the chair. The piano is silent again. You have read, played music, studied nature, considered science, and exercised several disciplines requiring years of practice. Society will describe this as passing the afternoon. If you live in a great house, you may walk through the conservatory or garden before dressing for dinner. Here, tropical plants grow behind glass, warmed by expensive heating systems and maintained by gardeners whose names your guests will never ask. Orchids, ferns, palms, and exotic specimens display the reach of empire in botanical form. Outside, lawns are clipped, paths swept, and flower beds arranged with military discipline. Nature has been invited onto the property, provided it agrees to behave. You pause beside a rare plant transported across an ocean and wonder why its leaves are turning brown. Somewhere, the head gardener already knows and is choosing his moment. You enter through a glass door and feel the temperature change at once. The afternoon outside is cool and damp. Inside, warm air carries the smells of wet soil, moss, leaves, and heated pipes. Moisture beads against the panes and runs downward in narrow streams. For a few moments, your spectacles may cloud, assuming you wear them, and society has accepted that your eyes occasionally require machinery. The conservatory is not merely a pleasant room filled with plants. It is a demonstration of money, technology, scientific curiosity, and access to distant places. Advances in ironwork and glassmaking have allowed wealthy Victorians to build increasingly ambitious structures. After the glass tax is repealed in 1845, large expanses of glazing become more affordable, at least to people for whom the word affordable has always possessed considerable flexibility. Glass houses appear beside country homes, botanical gardens, and fashionable villas. Some are modest lean-to structures. Others resemble railway stations designed specifically for ferns. Maintaining one requires constant attention. Boilers heat water that moves through iron pipes beneath benches and along walls. Fires must be fed with coal throughout cold nights. Vents are opened and closed to control temperature and humidity. Windows are shaded during strong sunlight. Plants are watered, repotted, pruned, tied, cleaned, inspected, and protected from insects that have also crossed continents and are delighted by the accommodation. The head gardener supervises all of this with the grave authority of a man whose employer has purchased a plant costing more than his annual wage. He may have trained for years, worked through several positions, and developed an intimate knowledge of soil, drainage, propagation, pests, weather, and the peculiar moods of exotic specimens. He knows which orchid needs less water, which palm dislikes draughts, and which fashionable flower has been placed in entirely the wrong corner by someone who admired its colour. That someone may be you. You ask whether the orchid is unwell. The gardener looks at the brown edge of one leaf. He says it has been receiving rather too much moisture. You remember instructing a junior gardener to water it more frequently. You say nothing. Orchids inspire particular excitement during the 19th century. Collectors pay remarkable sums for rare varieties brought from tropical regions. Plant hunters travel through forests, mountains, and colonial territories, gathering specimens for nurseries and wealthy patrons. Many plants die during transport. Others arrive damaged, unnamed, or accompanied by insects that begin exploring Britain with entrepreneurial confidence. The Wardian case improves survival. This sealed glass container creates a humid, miniature environment, allowing delicate plants to endure long sea journeys. It helps transport tea plants, ferns, orchids, and other valuable specimens across the world. It is an important botanical invention and also proof that the Victorians can turn a small glass box into an instrument of empire. Ferns become another obsession. The enthusiasm is known as pteridomania, a word that makes collecting damp green plants sound like a medical crisis. Fern motifs appear on ceramics, textiles, furniture, and decorative objects. Families take excursions to gather specimens. Rare varieties are cultivated in ferneries. A respectable woman may study and collect them, because botany offers intellectual activity while remaining safely surrounded by leaves. Outside, the garden is no less controlled. The lawn has been cut with a mechanical mower, a device patented in the early 19th century and increasingly used on large properties. Before this, grass required scythes, grazing animals, or substantial manual labour. Now it can be trimmed into a smooth green surface on which nothing useful is permitted to grow. Flower beds follow elaborate seasonal designs. Bedding plants are arranged in geometric patterns and replaced when their display ends. Gravel paths are raked, hedges are clipped. Kitchen gardens, hidden elsewhere, produce vegetables, herbs and fruit, without disturbing the decorative fiction that the estate survives entirely on roses. You walk slowly between the beds. A gardener several yards away straightens as you approach. He removes his hat. You remark that everything looks splendid. He thanks you. Neither of you mentions the orchid. You return toward the house as the afternoon light fades across the glass. Behind you, the gardening staff will continue watering, sweeping, stoking boilers, and correcting the small botanical decisions made by the family. Nature appears effortless. It has a very large staff. Before the evening begins, let us look beneath the comfort of your position. Earlier in the Victorian era, marriage places most of a wife's property, earnings, and legal identity under her husband's control through the system of coverture. You cannot easily sign contracts, control inherited wealth, or act independently in law. Marriage settlements may protect some property among wealthy families, but these require planning, lawyers, and male cooperation. The Married Women's Property Acts of 1870 and 1882 gradually improve the situation, allowing married women greater control over earnings and property. Progress arrives, but it has taken the scenic route and charged legal fees. You may live in a house containing paintings, silver, jewellery, land deeds, horses, furniture, and enough china to serve tea to a minor nation. Visitors may speak of your home, your carriage, your servants, and your position, yet the word your requires careful legal handling. Under coverture, husband and wife are treated as one person in law, and that person has somehow developed your husband's name, signature, and access to the bank account. Property you own before marriage may pass under his control. Wages you earn during marriage may belong to him. You may be unable to make a binding contract, sue independently, or dispose freely of assets without his consent. The law describes you as protected beneath your husband's identity. This protection resembles an umbrella that has taken your purse and refuses to let you leave. For a wealthy woman, family lawyers may have anticipated the problem before the wedding. A marriage settlement can place money or property into a trust managed for your benefit. It may guarantee you an annual allowance known as pin money, secure an income if you become widowed, and preserve funds for future children. The term pin money sounds charmingly small, as though your expenses consist of sewing needles and one ribbon. In practice, it may cover clothing, personal purchases, gifts, subscriptions, and the complicated financial work of remaining visibly wealthy. The settlement negotiations happen before marriage, often between fathers, guardians, trustees, and solicitors. Your future husband's income, debts, land, expectations, and family responsibilities are examined. Your dowry and inheritance are calculated. Provisions are arranged for sons, daughters, and widowhood. Romance may be present. It is not invited to review the documents. If the settlement protects you well, you may retain access to substantial money. If it does not, your comfort depends heavily upon your husband's character. A generous man may allow you broad control over household finances and personal spending. A controlling man may question every purchase, withhold money, or use financial dependence as a method of discipline. The law gives him considerable room in which to become unpleasant. This arrangement becomes especially dangerous when a marriage turns abusive. Leaving may mean abandoning your home, income, children, and social position. A husband generally has stronger legal rights over the children, particularly earlier in the century. A wife who separates may discover that motherhood, like property, has been filed under his authority. Reform comes slowly through campaigns, court cases, petitions, and public pressure. The Custody of Infants Act of 1839 begins giving some separated mothers limited rights to petition for access to younger children. Later reforms expand those rights, though equality remains some distance away and appears to have missed the train. Property law also begins changing. The Married Women's Property Act of 1870 allows married women to keep certain earnings and some inherited property. It is an important step, but not a complete transformation. The Act of 1882 goes much further, allowing a married woman to own, buy and sell property in her own right, and to enter contracts more independently. For women marrying after these reforms, the legal landscape becomes less absurd. For women already trapped in controlling marriages, improvement may still depend on money, knowledge, lawyers, and the willingness to risk public scandal. Social custom also lags behind law. A woman may technically control her property and still be expected to defer to her husband. She may possess an income and face criticism for spending it without consultation. Legal independence arrives on paper first. Domestic acceptance follows at a pace usually associated with elderly horses. You think of the jewellery upstairs in its locked case. Some pieces came from your mother, others were gifts from your husband. One necklace has belonged to women in your family for generations. Whether it legally belongs to you depends upon the date, the settlement, the terms of the gift, and how urgently your husband's creditors are asking questions. You live beautifully. The curtains are silk, the table is silver, the carpets are thick. Until the law changes, ownership remains the one luxury in the house that may not be yours. Rich or poor, a married Victorian woman is expected to produce children, and wealth cannot make childbirth safe. It can provide private rooms, experienced attendants, doctors, nurses, clean linen, and relief from physical labour. It cannot yet provide antibiotics, reliable blood transfusions, or a complete understanding of infection for much of the century. Pregnancy may return repeatedly across a marriage. Miscarriage, difficult birth, and maternal death remain real possibilities, discussed quietly if at all. You continue receiving guests, managing the household, and wearing carefully designed clothing while your body performs dangerous work beneath the silk. Respectability prefers not to mention the machinery. You may describe yourself as being in an interesting condition, expecting a happy event, or temporarily unable to attend certain social engagements. Almost any phrase is preferred to the direct statement that you are pregnant. The body is carrying out the principal duty expected of a married woman, but polite society approaches the details as though pregnancy has occurred through correspondence. During the earlier months, you may continue much of your usual routine. You receive visitors, answer letters, supervise servants, and attend dinners while attempting to conceal nausea behind the calm expression expected of a hostess. If a particular smell suddenly becomes unbearable, you do not announce that the roast has turned against you. You ask quietly for a window to be opened. Loose morning gowns and specially adapted maternity garments accommodate your changing figure. A corset may still be worn, though maternity models are designed with adjustable lacing and more room across the abdomen. Medical opinion varies, but extreme compression during pregnancy is criticised. Common sense has entered the discussion, though it remains surrounded by several yards of fabric. As your condition becomes visible, your public life may narrow. Victorian ideas of modesty often encourage withdrawal from major social occasions during the later months. Pregnancy is respected, expected, and considered unsuitable for enthusiastic display. You remain inside the domestic sphere, which is convenient because society has already placed you there. Your household prepares quietly. The nursery may be inspected, baby linen is sewn, a cradle is brought out of storage, the housekeeper checks supplies of sheets, towels, candles, hot water cans, and everything required for an event that everyone hopes will proceed naturally but prepares for with the concentration of a military campaign. A monthly nurse may be engaged to attend the confinement and remain afterward. She is expected to care for you and the baby during the weeks following birth. A physician or surgeon may also be called, particularly in a wealthy household, although many births are still managed by experienced midwives. The relationship between doctors and midwives changes across the century. Male medical practitioners become increasingly involved in childbirth among the middle and upper classes, bringing professional status, instruments, and an impressive ability to make the room nervous merely by opening a leather case. Forceps can save lives during obstructed labour, but their use requires skill. Anesthesia becomes another possibility after the introduction of chloroform in the 1840s. Queen Victoria famously uses chloroform during the birth of Prince Leopold in 1853, helping make pain relief more socially acceptable despite earlier religious and medical objections. This is genuine progress. It is not yet safety. Childbed fever remains a terrible danger, particularly when attendants move between patients without properly washing their hands or cleaning instruments. The work of physicians such as Ignaz Semmelweis demonstrates the importance of hand washing in the 1840s, but his conclusions meet resistance. Germ theory gains broader acceptance later through the work of Louis Pasteur, Joseph Lister, and others. Until then, a doctor may arrive carrying knowledge, confidence, and traces of his previous patient. When labour begins, the bedroom becomes the centre of the household. Fires are tended, water is heated, curtains are closed, servants move quietly through corridors. Your husband may wait elsewhere, receiving updates while being protected from the physical reality that has produced every member of his family. Hours pass. Birth can be quick, prolonged, ordinary, or catastrophic. Hemorrhage may become fatal because no reliable blood transfusion is available. Obstructed labour can threaten both mother and child. Infection may appear days later after everyone has begun celebrating. Yet most women survive, recover, and continue. After the child is born, bells may ring, letters are sent, and relatives are informed. The announcement gives the baby's sex first, because inheritance has been waiting outside the bedroom with a notebook. A son produces particular relief in families concerned with estates and titles. A daughter is welcomed warmly, though perhaps with the added observation that there will be another opportunity. You lie exhausted beneath clean sheets while the household congratulates your husband. He has had a very demanding evening. Now it is time to dress again. Your afternoon gown is removed, your corset adjusted, your hair rearranged, and an evening dress brought out with silk, lace, velvet, jewellery, and a neckline low enough to demonstrate that Victorian modesty operates according to a timetable. Gloves rise above the elbow. Diamonds appear if the occasion supports them. Your maid fastens hooks where you cannot reach and pins fabric in ways that assume you will not need to move suddenly. Downstairs, candles are lit, wine is opened, courses are assembled, and servants take their positions. You have been preparing for dinner for an hour. The cook has been preparing since breakfast. Your husband has changed his coat. The transformation begins by reversing much of the afternoon. Your bonnet disappears. Your walking boots are removed. Pins emerge from your hair one by one, and the arrangement that survived calls, shopping, tea, and several rumours is carefully dismantled before being constructed again in a form suitable for candlelight. Evening hair may sit higher, with curls, braids, flowers, feathers, or jewelled combs added according to the occasion. Your maid brushes loose strands into submission and warms the curling iron near the fire. She tests it cautiously before bringing it toward your temple. The entire evening now depends on her judgment of temperature. A faint smell of heated metal enters the room. You remain still. Nothing catches fire. The evening has begun well. Your corset may be tightened or changed if the gown requires a different shape. Dinner dress is less forgiving than morning clothes. Silk bodices are fitted closely, and the slightest crease suggests that either the dressmaker, your figure, or civilization itself has failed. The gown is lifted carefully over the bustle. Layers of fabric settle into position. Your maid fastens a long sequence of hooks and eyes down the back, each one small, stubborn, and located precisely where your own hands cannot reach. Victorian clothing has not merely encouraged dependence upon servants, it has engineered it. The neckline is lower than anything considered suitable during daylight. Shoulders and upper chest may be exposed while the arms remain covered by long gloves. This is perfectly respectable because the clock has passed a certain hour and several men are wearing white ties. Modesty has changed shifts. Jewellery is selected with equal care. Pearls may suit a younger woman. Diamonds, emeralds, rubies, or family pieces may appear for a grander dinner. The choice communicates wealth, age, marital status, taste, and whether your husband's investments are still performing convincingly. A necklace is placed around your throat, earrings are fastened, bracelets sit above the gloves. A small fan completes the arrangement, giving you something to hold during conversation and a socially acceptable way to create moving air near your face. Downstairs the drawing room is filling. Guests arrive in carriages and surrender coats, cloaks, and outdoor shoes to waiting servants. Names are announced at the door. Men in dark evening dress enter beside women whose gowns contain enough silk to affect international trade. You descend the staircase slowly. This is not the moment to hurry. The train of your gown must follow without twisting, catching, or revealing that the bustle has shifted slightly to the left. Your maid watches from above until you reach the final step safely. Her work is now entering public inspection. Your husband waits below in black coat, white shirt, waistcoat, and tie. His preparation has involved washing, shaving, dressing, and perhaps deciding which watch chain best communicates seriousness. He looks elegant. You look engineered. Together, you receive the guests. Introductions are made. Compliments are exchanged. Everyone remarks on the weather as though none of you discussed it 3 hours ago. You admire a woman's gown while noticing that the sleeves are from last season. She praises your necklace while calculating whether the stones are family diamonds or recent purchases. The butler watches the clock. Dinner must be announced at precisely the right moment. Too early suggests hunger. Too late allows conversation to weaken and the soup to lose hope. At last the doors open. The butler announces that dinner is served. Guests pair off according to rank and relationship. The most important woman enters on the arm of the host. You follow with the most honoured gentleman, guiding conversation while trying not to step backward onto your own train. In the dining room, candles shine against silver, crystal, porcelain, and polished wood. Flowers rise from the centre of the table. Place cards settle the question of who must endure whom for the next 2 hours. You take your seat carefully. The bustle folds reluctantly behind you. Your gloves remain on until the proper moment. A footman approaches with soup while another prepares the wine. Upstairs, your maid begins putting away the afternoon clothes. In the kitchen, the cook is shouting. At the table, everyone smiles. Dinner has begun, and the house is now performing at full capacity. At last, the guests have gone, the lamps are lowered, and the house begins settling into darkness. You return upstairs while servants clear glasses, secure doors, carry coal, and prepare tomorrow's fires. Your maid unfastens the gown, removes the jewellery, releases the corset, brushes out your hair, and extracts pin after pin until your head feels strangely light. The respectable wife, hostess, mother, employer, patroness, correspondent, and carefully managed public figure disappears layer by layer. For a few minutes, you are simply a tired woman in a quiet room, listening to the faint movement of the household you supposedly do nothing to run. Tomorrow will bring more letters, more calls, more menus, more decisions, and another dress with an unreasonable number of fastenings. But tonight, the curtains close, the fire sinks lower, and nobody requires an answer until morning. Your maid begins with the jewellery. The necklace is unfastened carefully and placed inside its fitted case. Earrings follow, then bracelets, brooches, and rings not intended to remain on your hands overnight. Each piece is checked before being stored. A missing stone discovered tomorrow morning would produce an investigation involving servants, carpets, candlelight, and several people being asked whether they had noticed anything unusual. Nothing unusual is found tonight. The diamonds return to their velvet compartments. They have completed their work of reflecting candlelight and reassuring the dining room that your husband's finances have not entirely collapsed. Next comes the gown. Your maid begins at the back, opening hooks and eyes one after another. The bodice loosens gradually. The skirt is lifted clear of the bustle and carried away before its train can collect anything else from the floor. It will be examined tomorrow for stains, loose seams, wax, wine, and the quiet evidence of dinner. Expensive gowns are not washed after each wearing. Silk, velvet, lace, and elaborate trimming do not respond well to ordinary laundering. Instead, they are aired, brushed, spot-cleaned, repaired, and stored carefully. Perspiration has been absorbed by the linen beneath, at least in theory. The outer dress continues its social life until fashion, damage, or repeated alteration finally defeats it. The bustle comes away next. Without it, your shape contracts toward ordinary human proportions. Petticoats are untied and lifted away. The corset cover disappears. Then your maid reaches the corset laces. The pressure eases slowly rather than all at once. A sudden release after hours of firm support can feel uncomfortable. She loosens the lacing in stages, then opens the busk at the front. Your ribs expand. Your abdomen remembers that it has been attempting to exist all evening. You take a deeper breath. Nothing tears. This feels like luxury. The corset is placed over a chair to air before being stored. It has held your body in the approved position through dinner, conversation, several courses, and a discussion about politics conducted by a man who did not notice that everyone else had stopped listening. Now your hair must be dismantled. Decorative combs are removed first, then flowers, ribbons, and false pieces. Your maid searches patiently through braids and coils, finding pins concealed with the thoroughness of an archaeologist excavating a small metal settlement. One pin has pressed against your scalp for several hours. The instant it is removed, you become aware that it has been responsible for a private headache since the soup. Another pin falls onto the carpet. Your maid hears it and retrieves it immediately. She can detect a falling hairpin through 2 closed doors and the sound of a carriage outside. This is one of the abilities acquired through long service and repeated responsibility for objects nobody else can find. At last, your hair falls loose down your back. She brushes it slowly, beginning at the ends and working upward. The movements are gentle and regular. Powder, dust, and traces of scented pomade are brushed away. Loose strands gather between the bristles and will later be removed, perhaps saved in the hair receiver for use in another elaborate arrangement. Even the hair lost at the end of the day may be expected to report for duty tomorrow. Your face is cleaned with cold cream and soft cloths. Powder, rouge, soot, and the faint residue of a long evening disappear. In the mirror, you look less polished and more familiar. There are shadows beneath your eyes. Your cheeks have lost their carefully managed colour. Your expression no longer needs to welcome anyone. A nightdress replaces the day's architecture. It is loose, soft, and wonderfully unconcerned with fashionable shape. Your maid places a wrapper nearby in case you need to rise during the night. She turns down the bed, adds coal to the fire, checks the water, and asks whether you require anything else. You say no. She wishes you good night and leaves. The door closes softly. Below, the servants are still working. Plates are washed, silver is counted, leftovers are stored, ashes are cleared. The butler checks the doors. The cook reviews tomorrow's supplies. Your maid has not finished her own day simply because yours appears complete. You lie beneath the covers and listen as the house quiets by degrees. A footstep crosses the corridor, a distant door closes. The last carriage rolls away beyond the curtains. The fire settles with a small crack and sends one final glow across the room. For the first time since morning, nobody is watching your posture, awaiting your answer, studying your clothing, or asking whether the salmon should be served with a different sauce. The household is still moving around you, but your part in it is finished for tonight. You close your eyes. Tomorrow is already being prepared. Fortunately, it has not yet rung the bell.